Have you ever met someone who seemed normal but there was just something about them that didn't seem right? Oh, let me answer this one. I have a great answer. I rarely dated. Rarely. I wanted to but circumstances didn't allow. A beautiful lady in my dad's church became a friend outside of church and she told me one day she had a single son who lived a few hours away. He was a mortician and was very wealthy and also my age. His picture wasn't bad in the old yearbook I found at the school where I taught. We exchanged numbers through his mom. We talked on the phone for hours. After a few weeks he drove down to meet me. Beautiful fancy car. Not too bad looking really and polite etc. Nice car. Millionaire. But something felt off. Something in my gut was telling me this guy was a red flag. It all just seemed too good to be true. I cut all contact and didn't see him again. Fast forward about 4 years and my mom sent me a link to a story. Local mortician kills wife with mistress. This guy killed his own, attractive wife with his less than average crazy-eyed cashier mistress. I repeat, they killed her. The body was never even found. I was once again reminded that I need to trust my intuition. Always. Trust your intuition. I accidentally gave my daughter herpes. A little over a week ago I kissed the top of our 7.5-week-old baby's head. It was a single, light kiss and she had a thick head of hair with no obvious scratches or other skin imperfections. But I had cold sores on my lips at the time. We have been really careful to avoid giving our children cold sores or otherwise pass along the herpes virus, HSV1. We have maintained a strict no kissing on the lips or face rule between everyone and our children, and I do not kiss my wife on the lips or other regions while I have cold sores. But just a few hours ago our 7.5-week-old baby was diagnosed with HSV1. She developed sores starting from where I kissed the top of her head within 24 to 48 hours of the kiss. We weren't sure what the sores were initially so we brought her to a walk-in medical clinic for assessment. They took a swab sample for testing and provided a prescription for topical, skin-applied, antibiotics while suggesting the sores could be due to a bacterial infection. But after 48 hours the sores were continuing to grow and spread across the top of her head. So we phoned the clinic and our family doctor, but they still had no test results. They then provided a prescription for oral antibiotics. But after 24 hours the sores were continuing to grow and were now across her forehead. We still had no test results so my wife took her to our family doctor. But our family doctor did not know the cause of the sores either and suggested we take her to the Children's Hospital Emergency. We took our baby to Children's Emergency that evening. They took a look at the sores and listened to our concerns. They also took swab, blood and urine samples to try to determine the cause of the sores, bacterial or viral, and to determine if it had spread to other organs or systems. They tried to take a sample near the spinal cord as well to check if it was in her central nervous system, but they were unable to collect what they needed due to her small size, 10 pounds, and movement during their attempts. While waiting for the results from the hospital, we were informed that the test results from the walk-in clinic showed only a culture of normal skin bacteria. But the hospital staff told this could be due to them collecting the sample from the surface and not opening up the sore to collect. She was admitted to the hospital and started on IV antiviral and antibiotic medication. After spending 48 hours in the hospital we were informed that she has contracted HSV1 and that the sores may reoccur in the same region it started originally, top of head, or around the mouth. Different infectious disease doctors gave varying options on where the sores may appear in the future. They told us that she will need at least a week of IV antiviral, as she is too young to take oral antiviral. My mom was infected with HSV1 when she was in grade 6, likely from her dad, and was hospitalized for a month. Apparently they thought at the time that she would die from it due to the severity of the response. And my older brother and I both were infected with HSV1 around that same age or younger from our mom, but we have had only recurring cold sores with no other major symptoms. I seem to get cold sores almost exclusively when I have a lack of sleep and thus put stress on the body, leading to a compromised immune system. Now our little girl has them despite our best efforts, and it breaks my heart. We are concerned about it now being easier to spread to our other children, and the possibility of it spreading to my wife's breasts which would affect her ability to breastfeed. Especially concerning if we have more children in the future. And I have found cold sores to be a cause of physical, emotional and social discomfort in my own life so I am very sorry to have passed it along to my daughter. I had no idea that HSV1 could be spread through contact with skin. Growing up I only heard of it being through mucous membranes, lip-to-lip kissing, sharing cups and utensils, etc., and a few years ago I read that it could spread to breasts or genitals despite not being HSV2, genital herpes. Looking it up online now, I am seeing that they suggest not kissing babies under 28 days to avoid causing neonatal herpes. But what I was reading did not make it clear that kissing any part of the baby could spread the virus. The doctor stated it is possible to spread through kissing the top of her head, but prior to diagnosis said he would be surprised if it was HSV1 because she was not under 28 days, she was 6.5 weeks at time of kiss. She was full term, healthy weight with no complications during pregnancy or postpartum. According to the info I found online, herpes on an infant or child can have life-changing consequences aside from the sores, such as blindness and brain damage and can often be fatal. Apparently the majority of the general population likely has herpes but a lot of people are asymptomatic, have never had any cold sores. And herpes can be spread within the body or to others whether or not there are sores present at the time, although it makes it more likely to spread to others if there are sores. My wife informed of a case, there is at least one article online from 2008 regarding it, where herpes had spread to an infant and they were hospitalized. But a week after the infant's sores were no longer present, the baby died due to the virus spreading within the body. So I am sitting here in the hospital full of regret over that single kiss, and hoping that she is able to make a full recovery.
But I am glad that she did develop visible sores and that I suggested along the way that the sores could be due to herpes, because they were able to diagnose and treat the virus relatively early, which may have prevented it from spreading to other regions of the body. I am also glad that our baby was healthy on seemingly all accounts prior to this incident, because it would likely affect her worse had there been other compromising factors. And I am hopeful that effective and safe therapeutic and preventative vaccines for the virus will be developed in the near future. I do not want to cause unnecessary or excessive fear among others, but I want to share my experience and raise awareness of the risk. I wish I knew what I do now a couple of weeks ago. I would take back that kiss in a heartbeat. My roommate almost got me expelled and arrested for a prank. My roommate was obsessed with one particular TV show, which I was also a fan of, but he was very into it. He joined different forums and groups about it. He participated in chat rooms about it. He was obsessed. At the time, it was up in the air as to whether or not the show would be cancelled. So, being an immature 19-year-old, I decided to have a little fun. I had recently found out about this service that would distribute anyone's article for free. Knowing that my roommate had alerts set up for everything to do with this show, I was fairly certain that if anyone was going to see what I was about to do, it would be him. I wrote up an article announcing the cancellation of the show. I started it off making it sound very official and professional and then deliberately threw some bizarre statements into the article, things that would never appear in any official announcement. I looked it over, sent it in, and promptly forgot about it. The next morning, I got up, jumped in the shower, and started getting ready for class. I heard my roommate shout, "Oh my God." I walked back into the room and asked, "What's going on?" My roommate looked devastated. "They canceled it. They actually canceled it. They're idiots." I asked him why they had done that. He proceeded to read the rest of the article out loud. As he reached the bizarre statements, he got a confused look on his face, held his hand towards the screen, and said, "What the hell is this crap?" I burst out laughing and my roommate realized he'd been had. He shook his head. "Urine butt? Seriously, dude? How did you even get that out there?" We had a good laugh about it. He vowed to get me back, and I went off to class. Later that day, I walked into our dorm and my roommate had a huge grin on his face. "Congratulations, dude, you're famous," he said happily. "What did you do?" I asked. "Oh, I didn't do anything," he replied. "This is all you're doing." He sent me a link and told me to open it up. The link opened up to a post on one of the fan forums of the show. The subject was the show's cancellation and the post was a direct copy of my fake article. Below, people were reacting with devastation and pure outrage at the network's decision to cancel the show. They had overlooked the bizarre statements and had taken the fake article as an official cancellation of the show. I couldn't believe that it had spread so far. I read page after page of devastated fans mourning the demise of their favorite show. And then the mood shifted. The creator of the show posted on the forum after he was contacted by several fans. The post was along the lines of, "Well, I hope we're not cancelled because I'm at the office and working. Now I'm fielding phone calls from my writers asking if they still have jobs." "Oh poop," I said. My roommate burst out laughing. "Oh poop is right, dude. Keep reading." As I continued to read, the tide of the comments turned from angry at the network to angry at whatever effing kid decided to pull this stunt. These people were out for my blood. They talked about tracking me down and beating the crap out of me. That was when I learned that my roommate was far from the most devoted fan. At least he found it funny. They wrote to both the network and the show creator encouraging them to serve paperwork on the service I used to release the article in order to find out my IP, which would have traced to the college and likely resulted in disciplinary, if not legal action against me. I spent the next 2 months thinking I was going to get expelled or arrested. Meanwhile, my roommate just laughed at me every time I got anxious and told me it served me right. The following month the fake article was referenced by TV Guide and is still mentioned on both the IMDb and Wikipedia pages for the show.
My Christian husband poked holes in his condom and baby trapped me. I gave birth to twins and I hate them, so I ran away. I've never wanted children solely for the reason that I did not want to spend my entire life caring for a child. The added risks of pregnancy deterred me completely from having kids, so even then, adoption or surrogacy weren't an option for me. Before my husband and I got married, he knew I despised having children. I didn't want my body to be huge or take care of whiny kids. He used to tell me that was fine and it wasn't a deal breaker for him. He could live without being a dad. A year later, he started to show me videos about baby's first steps, baby clothes, and gender reveals. He wasn't upfront about what he wanted, so I sat him down to explain his current behavior. There, he dropped the biggest bombshell on me. He's always wanted kids. Before I could protest, he gave me a solution. I can stay at home and he'll be the only one working so that I can take care of the kids. I don't think he realized that's exactly what I don't want to do. Mind you, he didn't even tell me any of this before getting married. I was very adamant on not having kids and he would always agree with me. I asked him what happened to that mindset. He explained that he's always wanted kids but didn't want to lose me, so he just went along with everything I said and hoped that once we got married, I would see that I wanted a large family, like he did. I was firm on telling him that was not the case. My opinion on kids has not changed whatsoever. I don't want the burden of a child for life, it would be too stressful for me. I was surprised when he gave in without a fight. He even stopped talking to me about kids as a whole. I wasn't suspicious of that, to be honest, but looking back at it now, I was so naive and stupid. I should have taken his behavior as a massive red flag. Because not only a few months later, he was rubbing my stomach a lot. I definitely thought it was weird at the time, but never actually commented on it. I'm also not on birth control for mental reasons, but we use condoms. One night, I came home from work and we had a lot to drink. We slept with each other, and though I don't remember much from that night, I do remember him going to the bathroom a lot. Everything was fine until the next morning I went to use our bathroom and I had a hunch to check out the condom from last night in the garbage. Surely enough, there were holes in them. I immediately started crying because I know I'm very fertile. My husband wakes up, sees me crying, and I ask him why he poked holes in the condom. He goes straight into denying everything. He said it was a manufacturing error and that he would never do such a thing. All men do is lie. I let him know that if I'm pregnant I'm getting an abortion, and he agrees. That is until a few weeks later when I confirm I'm pregnant, he tells me, "Babe, you can't have an abortion, you already had one with another man before, that's not healthy." I thought you were trying to be more Christian. I was embarrassed because he was right and it made me really upset that he was using my past abortion that was really difficult for me as an excuse for him to keep this baby. I know it was all his doing and I tried my best not to resent him for it, but everything I feared was becoming true. I kept the baby and my body got huge because I got pregnant with twins. My pregnancy was just awful. I was sore all the time, morning sickness was a beach, and the thought of pushing out both babies was a nightmare. Anything could go wrong in a pregnancy and I know that if it came down to saving me or the baby, my husband would choose the baby in a heartbeat. I was very depressed during that time, but my husband always came home happy and would rub my stomach, saying he was so excited for his babies to be born. He did this all the time despite me telling him it made me uncomfortable, but he would always say he was just trying to bond with them. He told me I should be more happy that we got blessed with 2 babies and I said, "Of course you think that because this is what you wanted." He told me to live a little and I would end up falling in love with the twins once they're born. I tried my hardest to be a good wife, though it was clear that I was just a baby maker to him at this point. After giving birth, postpartum depression hit me like a truck. I couldn't even look at the twins without feeling pure disgust for them. I had to quit my job because my husband refused to look after them, and now I'm a stay-at-home mom. My whole life had to revolve around these 2 kids who I don't even like. My husband gets to work all day and he only spends around 5 minutes with the babies. He's the one that wanted this, but now he's too tired from picking up my slack. I never even have time for myself. I haven't seen my friends in months, I haven't left the house to places that aren't the grocery store or pharmacy, and they're always whining and crying. I can't even go away for a while since he controls all the money. I ended up looking at some divorce lawyers and made a plan while my husband was at work. I did some research and took some tips from women who have left their abusive husbands. I packed an escape bag, hired a babysitter to take care of the twins while my husband was at work, and left for another city. I didn't tell my husband, and even though he's called, texted, and left voice messages countless times, I refused to answer him. He knows I'm filing for divorce and he's not happy about it. He sent me a message saying the kids miss their mommy as well as a bunch of pictures of them as a way to guilt trip me. But it didn't work because the love I have for those kids is non-existent. I know that if I didn't leave when I did, I would be miserable for my entire life. I just want to be my own person again.
Today I found out my boyfriend has been cheating on me with his mother for our entire relationship. My boyfriend and I have been together for almost a year now. We met at my mall food court job and immediately hit it off. After a month of knowing each other, he asked me to be his girlfriend. Of course I said yes. Our relationship has been pretty great up to his point. He takes me on dates, compliments me, and just makes me feel super special. The only weird thing is he would never let me meet his mom. His parents are divorced and have been for almost his entire life. The divorce was messy and his father ended up getting full custody. They had the typical every other weekend and 6 weeks out of the summer setup. I have met his dad and his paternal family, but he would be weird when I brought his mom up. He would tell me things like, "We have a complicated relationship," or "I'll tell you about it later on." About 3 months into the relationship I began to realize he would never answer his mother's calls or texts around me. He would hastily clear it out or step into another room to talk to her, even if it was just texting. I tried to not let it bother me because I wanted to respect his boundaries. Last week he spent the night with me for the first time. I woke up around 3 a.m. because of a bad dream and I couldn't go back to sleep. I rolled over to grab my phone in the dark but accidentally picked his up instead. I looked at the messages from his mother. I opened his phone and began to read through them and noticed they were mostly very intimate. There would be photos exchanged, hardcore texting, and messages for them to meet up for intimacy. I read the conversations in disbelief. I tried to pretend like it wasn't real and I dreamed it. A few days later I confronted him about it. It didn't take long before he broke down and told me everything. He had been having intimacy with his mother since he was 13 years old. They usually have intimacy once a week, sometimes more. They've been doing this throughout our entire relationship. He never told her that he had a girlfriend because he wanted them to still have their weekly sessions. At this point I don't know what to do. I love him with all of my heart, but I am so disgusted with him and his mother. I haven't talked to him since he told me everything. After he told me, I ran out and drove to a town 2 hours away. I blocked him on every social media and his phone number. I changed the locks to my house. I have also called the weekend to work so he can't find me. What should I do? Make it work out or break up with him? Update. Teenage son messed up big time and I am afraid of what happens next. He was officially charged with leaving the scene of an accident and fined for failure to maintain speed. I spoke to a few lawyers around town and they all agreed there is zero chance the district attorney will drop the charge. Our county is very tough on crime and they are campaigning on it. The district attorney refused any plea. They have lots of video evidence from the truck's front and back dash cameras, a gas station, and an intersection camera. Our focus is to try and get probation instead of jail time. I need to come up with a few hundred for the fine and $1,500 for the lawyer. That's in addition to the insurance rates that will definitely go up. As a kicker, my insurance has small accident forgiveness for damages lower than $500. The insurance estimate for the truck's damaged hitch came out to $504. They also want to suspend my son's license, so he won't be able to go to and from any job that isn't close by. We live in a really spread out area where a car is basically mandatory. I have found the man's address and have been studying his movements ever since. I know he leaves at 8 a.m. roughly every morning, is home for a break at 12, goes back to work for 1 and finally arrives home for 6. I am considering burgling his house to fork out some of the cash. That said, his clothes are dead, so he may be a broke boy and I may be wasting my time. I am just so upset with my son for getting caught like an absolute muppet. Trying to keep it together and work our way out of this, but it's frustrating. After watching the video I got even more mad. He clearly realized he hit the truck, then drove around it slowly, which allowed him to be caught.
A pizza delivery driver, intercepted a violent kidnapping during a pizza delivery.
I was having a really busy night at my pizza delivery job, non-stop back and forth without any time to even pause and take a pee. All of a sudden as I was driving to this particular delivery, the urge to go pee hit me. Things went from 0 to 100 in an instant. Thankfully I was close to the customer so could get this one over with quickly. Or so I thought. I pulled up to the house, and it was an area I delivered in before, so I could immediately see that something wasn't right. All the lights were off in the house, not even the glow of a television or anything. It was extra apparent because the street light closest to the door happened to be out of order. And on top of it all, the block was dead quiet. This is a big university area, and obviously there aren't many student renters in July, but there had to be at least one person, because someone ordered this pizza. Maybe they just liked sitting in the dark or they were out back in the yard. Whatever, I just didn't want to get out of my car and knock on a quiet house in the middle of the night without first checking that I had the correct address and the customer was inside. It was scorching hot that night, even after sundown. My car's AC is a joke, and the piping hot pizzas don't help things much, so I have to try and open the car door as infrequently as possible to keep any cool air in. I called the number the customer provided and the voice on the other end said, kind of brusquely and out of breath, "Yeah?" I just tried to keep it clear and concise, "Hey, it's your pizza out front, but there doesn't appear to be anybody home?" And the customer replied, still gasping for air, "Yeah, I'm not home." I had to pee so badly by that point that I was much less patient than I'd otherwise be with a customer right out of the gate. "Well, then we're going to have to terminate the order, because I've arrived in the stated delivery window, and you were supposed to pay in cash, so, I don't know what to tell you. Plan ahead next time." I instantly regretted letting my bladder do the talking for me as the voice on the other end came through more clearly as a young, bubbly, and very distraught girl who couldn't have been older than 20. "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, I was running down the street so I could barely hear you," she cried. "I just switched you out of my AirPods. Is that better? Sorry, I completely lost track of time at work, but I knew you were coming. That's why I'm literally running home right now. Please don't leave, I'm starving and I don't have a car. Seriously, please don't leave. 5 minutes max, okay? I know what it's like to be hungry, and running late, and have no car but not live near any restaurants." Plus when I heard her voice I began to remember more specifically having delivered to this place a couple times before, and she'd always been perfectly nice. Now I felt bad for snapping at her. I tried to walk it back, while simultaneously looking out my window for potential spots to pee. No, my bad, I'm letting the heat get to me and it's not your fault. No need to rush. See you when you get here." I hung up and, while surveilling the street, was starting to think I was really out of luck. All the other houses had people in them, and were close together, so there were no clumps of trees or out-of-the-way patches of land or anything. Of course I had just tossed my empty water bottle at the last delivery, because I'm an idiot. Finally, I decided it was escalating to the point of an emergency, and the safest bet was to use a bush in front of the woman's house. She wasn't home. The street light was out so no one would see me. The people who were home were inside. My car was parked across the street and we're a small shop who don't wear uniforms, so if someone did spot me, they'd have no way to connect me to my employer. Animals pee outside all the time. Humans are animals. This is fine. I scurried over to the tallest bush in her front yard. She didn't really have much of a yard, more just a walkway lined with bushes and flowers that ran adjacent to her front door. The biggest cluster of bushes, the only one where I could be sure there would be no visible splatter on the side of the house, was about 4 feet from her door. I looked both ways, unzipped, and let fly. After the initial millisecond of relief, I noticed the sound was way off, more like peeing on something solid than something leafy. I started panicking, thinking I'd aimed wrong, but once I start, I can't stop midstream, so I kept squinting into the darkness to see if maybe I was hitting a key rock or something and could just move a few inches over. Instead, all of a sudden, I heard a way more concerning noise. A deep voice exclaiming, "What the F?" And before I could turn around, assuming I'd been caught by a neighbor, a man came leaping out of the bushes. He blew by me, brushing my golden shower off him as did. He spit pretty emphatically on the ground, so I think I might have beamed him right in the face. I didn't see where he went after a few paces, but I remember hearing a car screech out from a bit further away after a minute. I'd gotten some night vision by that point, so I was able to make out his height, build, and outfit, but only the most general details of each. I was in such shock that I didn't even put my PP away. I just stood there trying to figure out what had happened. The reality was so terrifying that my mind refused to accept it, and impulsively searched for a reasonable explanation that could make everything okay. I thought, could these bushes lead to some backyard area and just look like they were against the house? Could they have been obscuring an open window? My inner voice was desperately screaming, "Bruh, that man was wearing a hoodie in 90-degree weather. That was a bad man. You're in a bad situation." But the very idea that I was within inches of a guy who would be hiding in bushes at all, let alone in front of a young woman's house at night, just wasn't something I was ready to grapple with yet. I was coping by not coping. My fight or flight response totally failed me at that point, because my dumb butt did the absolute last thing I should have done, and approached the bushes to try and validate this. There must have been a good reason for a man in a hoodie to be behind these bushes in the middle of the night. Theory. So I walked over to the side, turned on my phone flashlight, and tried to peer around the line of shrubbery. That's when I saw the bag. My roommate slash brother-in-law just exploded at me. I'm feeling overwhelmed and at my wit's end. I've known my brother-in-law, 26M, for almost 2 years, and I've done a lot for him, but he's been taking advantage of me recently. He's a chronic slob and struggles with addiction. I've been cleaning up after him for months, and it's gotten worse since my sister moved in. They both enable each other's messy habits. I've wanted to address this issue many times but chose to be kind about it. However, now that they're having a child, I'm planning to move out as soon as possible and distance myself from them. Cleaning up after them wouldn't bother me as much if I didn't have a broken collarbone. They're well aware of the pain I'm in, as the accident happened in October, not too long ago. I jokingly sent a picture of 3 moldy cups to our house group chat without a caption. In response, my brother-in-law said, "When you send me $4,000 for my couch, I'll clean up my mess." To provide context, this relates to an incident from 2 years ago when I first moved in. Someone scared my cat while I was at work, causing him to pee on the couch. I've tried washing it multiple times, but it still has a slight urine smell, along with a mix of body odor and other smells from when our old roommate used it inappropriately. I asked my brother-in-law to come downstairs for a conversation, and he basically claimed that A, it's his house, so he'll do what he wants, even though my name is on the lease, and we all pay rent, and B, the moldy items were accidental, and it's somehow my fault for sending a shady text without realizing the cups were his. I didn't have any ill intent behind the picture and explained this to him. I also expressed my exhaustion from cleaning up after him while dealing with a broken collarbone. In response, he asked, "Who was the first to show up when you had your accident?" To provide context, he didn't show up for me, as the accident involved his ex, and we barely knew each other. The paramedics arrived first, not him. I never anticipated such an explosive reaction from a simple text, or else I wouldn't have sent it. I'm just tired of constantly cleaning up his mess. Fortunately, my other roommate was present and supported me. I'm in shock, to be honest. Moving out isn't an immediate option for me, and I'm feeling quite uncomfortable. Additionally, prior to this incident, he has been slamming doors so hard that the entire house shakes and punching walls. I don't want my dumb and disabled sister wearing white to my wedding. I, 23, am getting married to my fiancée, 36, in around 2 months. I asked all of my bridesmaids to wear light purple to my wedding. For more context, I am the oldest of 4, and my 2 younger twin siblings are both 21, who we'll call Amy and John. My youngest sister is 17, who we'll call Abby for this story. Abby has a severe mental disability, which has affected her and our whole family's lives. I asked all of my bridesmaids to wear light purple to my wedding. Abby, however, was hesitant and asked me, "Do I need to wear a dress?" Abby never liked dresses, so it hurt me to tell her yes and that I would appreciate it if she wore a dress. I also told her she didn't need to wear a super puffy dress like the other girls but could wear something more comfortable. I contacted my mother afterward, asking if she could take Abby dress shopping. Later, she sent me a photo of Abby in a dress. It wasn't a purple dress, as I asked her to pick. Instead, it was a wedding dress. I asked her what this was, and my mother replied, "The dress Abby will wear to the wedding." I asked her if this was a joke, and she said no. I asked her where she got the money because I only gave her $200, and she said she paid for it herself. I told my mom I didn't want anyone but me wearing white to the wedding and that we could pick the same dress for her out but in purple. After this, she got super upset with me and told me that I was being selfish and unreasonable. I asked Abby to wear a dress and that this was the one she picked out. She said I was being an a-hole for not letting her wear something that made her feel comfortable. I told her I knew she wouldn't let Amy wear white to my wedding, so I asked her why Abby was different. My mom said that because she's disabled, she should get certain rights that Amy or I wouldn't have. I got angry at her and told her that Abby shouldn't be treated differently in these situations because of her disability. End of discussion. After hearing this, my mother gave me an ultimatum that I would either let Abby wear the dress or both of them would not attend the wedding. I was shocked that she would go this far because of a dress, so I told her I would think about it, but I still didn't want Abby at my wedding in white.
My narcissistic mom wants me to take care of my disabled sister for the rest of my life. When I refused, she abused me even more. My childhood was immediately destroyed when my mom cheated on my dad and got pregnant. They got divorced as soon as my dad found out, and the affair baby, my sister, was born. I was 7 when all of this happened, so it's messed me up a lot. It didn't help that my mom somehow managed to get full custody of me. She played dirty and brought up past issues my dad used to have, like his substance abuse problem he had before I was even born. She argued that he was unfit to parent me by himself, and the judges agreed. To this day, my mom is still smug that she was able to pull one over on my dad, but he doesn't say anything bad about my mom. Growing up, she wanted me to hate him as much as she hated him, so she always badmouthed him to me, saying that there was nothing he could do right and he regrets ever marrying him. It's why she cheated. I tell my dad, but he says legally, he can't do anything about it and I just have to work with it and wait until I'm 18. I barely get to see my dad at all and I'm suffocated by mom. Since I'm older than my sister, my mom has me be her babysitter. I wouldn't complain as much if she wasn't profoundly disabled to the point where she requires assistance for everything. She's basically useless, and I will admit, I do resent her. Ever since she was born, all my time outside of school has been dedicated to her. I stopped learning the piano, going to my friend's house, and playing basketball because I had to help her. I have been wearing the same clothes at home for the past 3 years since my sister has priority over everything. I could never eat unless she was eating too. She caught on to this and purposely starved herself for a whole day, and when I told my mom, She said I had to suck it up. It was even worse because I was on my period and my cramps were acting up. My dad used to pay a lot more child support than required for the first 2 years after the divorce, but 90% of the money went to my sister, so he stopped and started paying the minimum. Still only 10% goes to me. I don't blame him for this because I don't think he should support an affair baby. Besides, he's been doing any legal proceedings he can to help me. He tried to take my mom to court about not using the child support correctly, but it was unsuccessful. Only in the past 3 months have I managed to get a bit of time to myself without having to take care of the affair child when I'm not at school. I can't keep living like this, so I applied to colleges far away from my mom and her affair child. I made sure to collect my college letters before my mom saw them, but I missed one and she went ballistic on me. She yelled that I was never going to college, especially not ones out of state. I said I wanted to pursue a career and study, but she laughed and said my job was taking care of my sister. She kept talking about me never leaving home because my sister needed me. I told her that was her job since she was the mom, and she slapped me across the cheek. She told me the only thing I was good for was taking care of my sister, so I should give up on going to college or moving out because they were never going to happen. She then grounded me and sent me up to my room without food or water for the rest of the day. I called my dad to tell him what happened, and he said he was going to do anything in his power to get me out of here. The courts may have denied him full custody, but he was still my dad, and the fact my mom hit me could be used as proof against a police officer or a judge. Update: I'm free. It took a long time, but my dad got me out of there. Now I can really live my life.
They took her cat's life, so she took everything from them. On Christmas. Years ago, I used to work with a receptionist in a vet clinic named Margot. Margot was and still is a very sweet 65-year-old woman who had been at this practice since it was opened, some 40 years ago. She always had a smile, a joke, compliments and baked goods for your birthday. She never had an unkind word to say about anyone. She was seriously one of the coolest people I had ever worked with, and she basically knew everyone, from our regular clients to our mailman's granddaughter. The only bad thing about Margot, and this was not her fault, was that she and her family lived next to one of the trashiest, nastiest families I had ever met that had 2 even nastier pit bulls. I'm talking nastier than poop that had been hoarded by dung beetles for years. Nasty. And these dogs were constantly escaping and terrorizing the neighborhood, even trying to get into her house. Margot had asked them more than once to please keep the dogs contained, especially since she had an elderly, fat cat named Smokestack, and these pits had attacked smaller animals before. The family basically told her to rot in hell, that they knew what they were doing, how dare she accuse the breed, yada yada, basically blowing her off. Margot knew there had been reports filed against her neighbors, but nothing had ever been done about it really. So she made sure to keep Smokestack in the house to keep him safe and was very careful not to let him out. If you had been paying attention up until this point, you'll notice I'm using the word was and had regarding old Smokestack. And it was as awful as you think. 3 weeks before Christmas, Margot had the day off and was in the garage with Smokestack fiddling with some Christmas decorations. Unbeknownst to her, the pits next door got out and broke through the bottom of her garage door. They went right for Smokestack before she could blink and started to tear the cat apart. Margot screamed for help, and it was only when her son and husband came out with a baseball bat that they were able to free Smokestack from the jaws of these dogs. I was working this day and will never forget when she came in, crying harder than I had ever seen anyone cry in my life, clutching poor dying Smokestack in her arms. Her husband had to hold her while we tried to bring Smokestack back, but we couldn't do it. It would have taken a miracle of God and then some, and he passed away, a truly crap way to go in what should have been the golden years of his fat cat life. Margot sat there for a while with his mangled body, quietly crying for a while before she finally kissed whatever part of him was still intact and stood up. She told us all, "I've got a job to do, take care of him, girls." And then left. We figured Margot would take a few days off to be with family and then continue on with life as normal. We figured wrong. Now when I say Margot knew everyone, I mean, everyone. Right after she left the hospital, Margot gathered herself up and went to the police with pictures of poor Smokestack and told her story. The same police officers she had watched grow up over the last 20 years from rowdy middle schoolers she used to help babysit to the officers they were today. They were absolutely shocked to hear what had happened to their surrogate grandma and pushed her case to the front of the line. The case found itself before a judge whose daughter had gone to school with Margot's daughter. The judge granted an emergency, dangerous animal extraction warrant to her neighbors. Of course, there was a hearing. Within 2 weeks, which I gotta admit, was ridiculously fast. The neighbors tried to argue that their dogs weren't aggressive. They even went so far as to accuse Margot of having it out for their family and making it all up. But their argument trickled when the dozens of dangerous animal reports were presented and finally completely dried out when Margot presented the surveillance video her grandson had gotten showing the dogs coming into her property and attacking poor Smokestack. The emergency extraction and humane destruction of her neighbor's dogs was granted. It was Christmas Eve when Margot heard a knock on her door. She opened it up to see the neighbors standing there, sobbing uncontrollably. They were begging her to stop animal control, that they had these dogs since they were puppies, how the kids would be devastated and it would ruin Christmas, and if she could find it in her heart to give the dogs another chance. Up until this moment, the neighbors had behaved abominably. They didn't offer to fix the garage. They never apologized for trying to slander her name in court. Hell, they didn't even pay for Smokestack to be cremated. At no point had they even shown the slightest shred of remorse for what damage their dogs had done. And as the neighbors stood there, blubbering and whimpering about how this was going to ruin their Christmas, Margot looked them straight in the eye and told them, in her calmest voice, "You took away my family, so now I'm taking yours." And shut the door in their face just as animal control pulled up onto the driveway. Margot was not surprised as she watched the dogs get hauled into the truck and taken away. After all, it was her idea for animal control to take the dogs on Christmas Eve, a perk from having known the AC officer supervisor for years. Margot even made sure the dogs were euthanized before the outside Christmas lights turned on that night. The family never received the remains, nor did they ever get a chance to bring another animal into their family, as the father proceeded to intoxicated drive into a telephone pole that same night, unaliving him instantly. Mom went off the deep end, so CPS picked up the kids by February. And ultimately, the house foreclosed in September. Despite how traumatic Smokestack's death was, I'd like to think that if the neighbors had shown at least some regret, Margot might not have gone as far as she did. She was / is still the person to forgive and forget. Or maybe, she ultimately knew it had to be done, to push it to this point of no return before another family lost a member to these irresponsible neighbors. Either way, thank you Margot for making the world a little bit safer for the pets in the world. And rest in peace, Smokestack. Hopefully I'll see you on the other side with your favorite orange sock and a can of tuna. Who is the most fascinating person you've met in prison? I've worked in a prison for some time in medical. What surprised me more than anything else is how many inmates have serious mental illnesses and below normal IQ. A lot of them don't even belong in prison. Prison makes them so much worse. One time, one such inmate was having a fit and asking to speak to someone from behavioral health. Well, it was night shift, and we didn't have any BH professionals on duty at the time, so I agreed to go talk to him. He was a black male in his 30s. Asked violent offender. It turned out that he was angry because he had gotten moved from one cell to another and his radio had gotten damaged and some of his stuff was missing. He was frustrated and didn't feel like he was getting an explanation. The inmate thought it was because everyone hated his music. They always be complaining about my music, and that's why they broke my radio, he said. And to emphasize the point, he turned the radio on full blast with one of Duran Duran's songs playing. When he turned it off after a few seconds, I remarked, "Well, I think that's outrageous. Who would have a problem with Duran Duran?" That got him. "You like Duran Duran?" "Oh, yeah. My sister was their biggest fan in the 80s. Played them all the time." Which means I was listening to the inmate's mood changed, and he showed me his property form that had everything and asked me to verify that the radio was recorded as undamaged on the form. As I looked at it, I noticed that he had a box of crayons listed among his possessions. I asked him what sorts of things he draws and colors. The inmate pulled out a folder containing some blank coloring pages that he had of various things. I saw one picture of an owl and mentioned that I like owls. He told me he'd color it for me. "I'll tell you what, then. If you promise to color that owl for me, I will come back tomorrow and visit you to see how you're doing. Deal?" He agreed to it. Next day I showed up and the guy was absolutely jubilant. The owl was perfectly colored, and he insisted that I take it. He couldn't stop talking about it either, and he remarked somewhere in the middle, "All my life my folks told me not to trust white people. But you did what you said you would." It was such a small thing, and it mattered to this man to the point that it made him question the negativity that may have led him to the hard place he found himself in. I will never forget how happy he was right then. For my part, I still have that owl picture hanging on my refrigerator.
What happened to you when you were young that you didn't understand until years later? When I was 6 and my brother was 4, we used to walk to our cousin's house, which was 2 houses down. One evening, we asked our mother if we could go over and she said yes and lets us walk over by ourselves. While we're walking, this car drives up to us and asks if we knew where the nearest McDonald's was and if we'd like to come with him. I told him we weren't allowed to eat McDonald's without our mother's permission, and turned to get her to ask if we were allowed. She was already running outside to get us when the car sped off. I was around 15 when I was reminiscing with my family and she brought it up. Creepy realization. In kindergarten I had a best friend named Daniel and we played with toy dinosaurs and traded them all the time. January comes around and I invite him to my birthday party I was having at my house. He never showed up that day, and my mom told me that day he wasn't going to be able to make it as well as he wouldn't be able to come to school again. Little kid me was like, okay, you'll see him later. He died in a car crash on the way to my birthday party.
Couples who only smash one time a year. What's your experience? I love my boyfriend, but he doesn't turn me on at all. Before I dated my boyfriend, I was in an abusive relationship. I won't go into too much detail, but our intimate experiences weren't the most pleasant and I got a lot of trauma from being taken advantage of. When I started dating my boyfriend, I was reluctant to open myself and body to someone new again, but he made me feel incredibly safe and loved. I never worry about things taking a bad turn like before. I no longer had to keep up my walls. I could love him all I wanted. We get freaky in bed sometimes, but if I'm being honest, he's never made me come once. I know for a fact that I'm over my last relationship, but getting over the physical trauma has been a challenge. My biggest regret is, I faked my organisms with him for 3 whole years because I couldn't take it anymore. I knew that he and I were getting close to getting married as it's been a more relevant conversation, but if this isn't resolved I simply can't marry him. The way I saw it, if I couldn't organism with him, I'd have to leave him for self-reflection, and that's not something I would want to do, but it'd be absolutely necessary. When I came clean to him, he actually took it fairly well than I think most guys would. He saw it as a bonding experience, as something we could work on together. Together we did a bunch of different foreplay and experimented with different sensory stimulations. Nothing. Zilch. Nada. So much was happening but nothing was happening at the same time. Usually if I'm aroused, my blood starts racing and I'll even start squirming in bed a little. I just felt terrible. I knew I loved my boyfriend, but I felt terribly guilty that I wasn't turned on by him. It's not like I was never aroused by him before, it was just never enough for me to have a big O, so I tried to look for solutions again. I've looked up different articles, and they all recommended that I use oil. I went to our local adult toy shop and picked up some random little purple oil, not knowing you can't just buy any oil. I surprised my boyfriend with it and he was excited to try again, and was committed to helping me teach him. We set the mood in my room, lit some candles, turned down the lights, and got to making out. As soon as he started massaging the oil on me, I felt a burning sensation and threw him off me. I ran to the shower and washed and rinsed my insides alone, crying. I joined my boyfriend back in bed, both of us feeling defeated. He argued that I was faking the burn and it couldn't have been that bad. This was almost my final straw. I packed my bags and left to sleep at my parents' house for a couple nights. When I returned a couple days later, my boyfriend finally must have taken the hint and took some initiative because he brought me a surprise. He told me that when I was gone he was doing his own research and had ordered me a quickie kit filled with 3 different kinds of oils. The oils were meant to arouse me so that I could only be focused on the intimacy between me and my boyfriend, instead of focusing on the trauma I had gone through. I told him I wasn't sure about trying oil again because of what happened last time. He reassured me that this experience would be completely different because it will relax me and ease the tension between us. He said that the second I didn't like it, oils would be off the table for good, but he wanted me to see that this experience was going to be worth it. He even had a theory that if we perfected our foreplay, then our overall experience would be 110 times better. That enticed me and I said, screw it, let's just go for it. We used the quickie kit right then and there, and this time something was different. Without me saying anything else, he threw me back down on the bed. This time the lights were out and all I could do was relax under him. He got down to business and I felt him massage the arousal oil on me as his fingers worked their magic. There was a fresh, clean aura that only turned me on more. The arousal oil had relaxed me so much that all I could feel was my boyfriend's fingers, everything else was melting away. He slipped in an intimacy melt and he kept talking about how what I got for him. He angled his fingers in a way that made me feel like I was peeing. I couldn't hold it in anymore. At this point, I knew I was close to finishing, so I told him to put it in me. He pulled out the CBD lube and I helped massage it on him slowly. When he put it in me, he was going at the perfect rhythm, and since I was so much more sensitive than usual, I just knew I was about to climax from him. But he kept going, and my legs started quivering even though it felt like only 5 minutes passed. When we both finished, we both wanted to keep going, but ultimately I told him to stop. I tried to stand up but my legs gave out, and I was shaking on the floor. In the blink of an eye, I felt a shock of cold water on my back. I woke up and opened my eyes to see my boyfriend holding me in our bathtub. He told me that I passed out when I tried to stand up. The only words I could form were, "You can give me the ring now." We both laughed and agreed to talk about that later when I was in better condition. I felt so loopy, but then I remembered the quickie kit and felt a wave of excitement come over me again. I told him I wanted to go a second round with the quickie kit, but this time I'll do some more foreplay on him. I'll spare you guys the details, but as you can imagine, this was the greatest thing we've ever bought. 100% would recommend.
I hate going out with my girlfriend. My girlfriend, female 26, and I, male 26, had been together for 2.5 years. Before her, I was an extroverted, fun-loving person who loved a night out at the bar. I absolutely hate it now when we go out together. For some context, she's 2 inches taller than me, and a little bit better looking than I am. I'll admit that. She's like a 9 and I'm like a 7, so when we go out together and guys hit on her, it's expected. I take it as a compliment and keep it moving. Once guys see that we're together, they're usually respectful and we can all go on with our nights. What's been happening more and more recently is that women have started coming up to us asking her if I'm bothering her. When she says that we're in a relationship, they ask her what the F, why. They say how since she can have anyone she wanted, why would she ever choose to be with me? How she should leave me ASAP because she can do so much better. This has happened on 3 separate occasions in 3 different states. The most recent time was last night and the girl was whispering in my girlfriend's ear. She literally pointed at me and did the pointing down the throat gag thing and then gave me a thumbs down. I want to reiterate that these women are complete strangers to us. Why do women feel like it's okay to walk up and judge people's relationships? Why is it okay, in their minds, to talk about me like this, in front of me no less? I hate it, but it's making me resentful about going out with my girlfriend. I know that's not fair and I know that she isn't doing anything wrong. I don't know how to not feel like this though. It's starting to be reflected in my self-esteem and it's affecting my mood more often than I'd like. The thing is, I'm not even unattractive. I regularly get hit on by women as well. I like to think I'm nice to everyone, which is one of the reasons my girlfriend loves me. I dress well, I have a college degree, and a really good job. I work out 4 to 5 times a week, and I eat with intention. I genuinely feel that my life and looks are getting close to my highest potential, which is why it hurts so badly when these women speak of me this way. Last night I couldn't even sleep due to anxious thoughts of her leaving for someone better. If this has happened 3 times now, does that mean it's true? How do I relay these feelings to my girlfriend without being defensive or sounding resentful towards her? How can I have any sense of self-esteem moving forward? This shite really does hurt.
My stepdad rubbed one out in front of me again. 2 nights ago, the incident happened. My mom and stepdad were playing a board game, and I was watching TV. My mom and stepdad got very drunk. Eventually, my mom was carried to bed. My stepdad got interested in what I was watching and decided to come sit in the living room with me. My stepdad sat on the couch across from me and asked to massage my feet. I refused, but it didn't take long for me to notice something. Similar to the previous incident with my stepdad, I looked over to see him touching his saggy manhood that was hanging out the bottom of his shorts. I looked away and I tried to believe that I wasn't seeing what I was seeing. But I looked back and that was definitely what he was doing. I kind of froze up again and just decided to get out. I ended up coming up with an excuse to leave the house, and I went and spent the night at my dad's house. I went downstairs when I was ready to leave, and saw that he was still rubbing one out, now watching adult films on his phone. I uncomfortably said bye to him. He tried to get me to stay, saying that he was lonely and enjoying watching a movie with me, even though the adult films on his phone was still playing on full volume. I just pretended that I didn't hear him and left. The next day, I texted him to confront him. We talked a bit about what had happened, and I expressed my feelings on the situation. I don't feel any more safe. Some things he said makes me think he's attracted to me. I always thought that those feelings were just me overreacting, but now I don't know. I haven't been able to look him in the face or even talk to him since then. He promised it would never happen again. He said he wanted to give me a reason to trust him and is disgusted with his behavior, saying he can't help but being a dirty boy. I can't tell my mom because she is a raging addict who had claimed previously that I am trying to take his attention away from her. I don't want any attention, I want to be left alone. Edit, he just tried to touch me in my sleep. I'm calling the cops on him. My awful mom let me get kidnapped as a child. I was saved by a stranger and I owe him my life. Can you help me find him? One night my mom and I were on a late-night car drive, but I wasn't sure why we were even doing this. My mom and I didn't have some sort of bond where we could just do things like this. In fact, she was a horrible addict and never took care of me as a kid. I could always tell she hated me and used substances to cope with the fact she had me. My mom drove up to some sketchy house and left me in the car by myself for what felt like forever. Suddenly, the car door swung open. I remember thinking it was my mom and how happy I felt that she came back for me because I was so scared. But then, someone violently grabbed me by my arm and yanked me out of the car. I started screaming and crying until the man looked in my eyes and said, "Be quiet and don't try to run or I'll unalive you." I was scared to death, so I listened. He held me tight by my arm, shut the car door, and walked with me down the street. I looked back at the house my mom was in, hoping that she would come out at the last second and save me. I looked at the house as long as I could as the man dragged me further and further away. I knew my mom didn't like me, but even she couldn't be so cruel as to not rescue her child, right? I mean, I was only 6 and just wanted to be loved. It wasn't my fault she had me, so why was I being punished in the most inhumane way? I can't even explain how scared and confused I was. We walked for a little while and ended up in the projects. The projects were a bunch of buildings crammed together in a horrible neighborhood. We walked into one of the buildings and went up a flight of stairs. My legs and feet hurt like hell, but I was too scared to stop moving or complain. As we continued, I saw some random guy smoking a cigarette in the stairway. Then, without warning, the guy that kidnapped me fell to the ground. It all happened so fast, but the next thing I remember is the cigarette guy punching and kicking the kidnapper in his head and face. When he was out cold, the cigarette guy picked up the kidnapper by the back of his jacket and threw him down the stairs. You have no idea how scary and violent it is to see an unconscious man fall down the stairs. There was just so much blood everywhere. To this day I still have a fear of falling downstairs. I don't know how the cigarette guy knew to help me, but I'm glad he did. Maybe he could see tears in my eyes, maybe he just picked up on something and had a bad vibe, but he acted instantly. The first second he could, he attacked my would-be kidnapper. The guy started pacing back and forth, swearing at himself, gritting his teeth, and clenching his fists. He started to ask me questions with an attitude like, "Why are you out this late? Where are your parents? Why would you talk to strangers?" I was in so much shock and confusion I couldn't answer the man's questions correctly. He asked if I knew my way home and I told him I didn't. I told him a broken story about what happened, and somehow with the information I gave him he knew where my mom's car was. He told me he would take me back if I promised over and over that I wouldn't tell the police that I saw him or anyone that looked like him, and made me promise that I wouldn't even tell the police anything. I remember him telling me the police don't like me. I just wanted to go back to my mom, so I agreed. Outside of the projects, there were cop cars everywhere and he was doing his best to avoid all of them. I assumed now that the police were looking for me. Eventually I saw my mom standing by her car and she was surrounded by police. When I told him, he let me run to the police and he ran away. I called out my mom's name and she hugged me tight. Then they started questioning me as well. I don't remember too much about their questions, but I remember my mom telling the police some convoluted story that just didn't make any sense. She basically told me to not say anything, so I didn't say much, but cried a whole bunch. We went home later that night, and after a couple of days, my dad picked me up and knew something was wrong. When he asked, I told him everything that happened. I never lived with my mom again. When I grew up and had time to think about that day, I never forgave my mother. But to the man that saved me, thank you. Update: I found cigarette guy. I had the chance to talk to him a few days ago, but he seemed very cautious and in disbelief. It took me a few moments to gain his trust, and he became very happy and excited the more we talked. I did ask him about the kidnapper and whether he knew him. He did not. The kidnapper wasn't even from the projects. He said he knew the people that lived on the floor above and they wouldn't have anyone that looked like the kidnapper around their home. He assumed the kidnapper was taking me to the roof because people would do a ton of sketchy things on the roofs of the project buildings. The kidnapper had paused when they made eye contact, and he could immediately tell that the kidnapper was up to no good. So, he just took a drag of his cigarette and acted like he didn't care because he didn't want the kidnapper to run away. When the kidnapper walked up the stairs, cigarette guy attacked him as soon as he came close enough. It was really cool learning his perspective on the whole situation, and we're both doing so much better now.
Men and women of Reddit, what made you not want a second date with someone? She showed up at the bar already so drunk that she could not walk without my assistance. 1. She drove herself there. 2. It was 2 in the afternoon. 3. She wanted to continue drinking as soon as we met there. He spoke over me the whole time. At the end of the date he said I'd been too awkward because I hadn't spoken much, so he was going to F me next time he saw me to break the ice. Needless to say, I did not see him again. On a first date at a coffee shop, the guy picked up my foot. I was wearing cute sandals. He rubbed my foot for a second and I was like, what the F? Then he put all of my toes in his mouth. At the table, in the coffee shop, he kissed me and then started growling like a dog. Nice and simple. A nice girl gets it out of the way early. I guess I better tell you that I'm going to expect you to stop talking to any other girls you might have in your life. She then explains, yes, everyone, no, she's serious. She gets jealous easily. That one was the only first date I ever ended early. Even the one where the woman brought her little brother I saw through. She had already put our pictures through one of those what would your baby look like apps and started talking about how we would raise them. He lived with his ex. What's the most messed up Reddit post of all time? There is an extremely infamous relationship advice post by a husband, which started off by him saying that his wife isn't the smartest cookie in the jar. The couple was struggling financially, living month to month, but they got by. They had kids too. The wife suddenly gets the genius idea that they could make a bunch of cash if their car crashed and got written off. This happened to one of her friends who won an insurance claim after purposely driving into a ditch and was encouraging others to do so. The husband says no every time the wife talks about it. He explains reasons why and finally makes her promise not to talk about it at all. Next week, the husband gets a call from the police saying the wife had run into a terrible accident and is currently in police custody. Well, as it turns out, the wife decided to go through with her plan behind her husband's back. She had been waiting at a traffic stop, then suddenly accelerated forward during a red light and drove headfirst into a vehicle coming from the other side at top speed. She thankfully wasn't injured, but the other vehicle had a mother and a 3-year-old kid who were instantly killed, and another teenage kid was in critical condition who ended up dying hours later in the hospital. The husband visits his wife in custody and she acts all proud with no remorse as if she did something great for her family. The husband made the post asking whether he should come clean about her talking to him earlier about the accident and insurance fraud, which will likely add decades to her sentence. The post stayed up for less than an hour. What are some true facts that sound completely false? More people are unalived each year by vending machines than by sharks. Oxford University is older than the Aztec Empire. When you get a kidney transplant, they usually just leave your original kidneys in your body and put the third kidney in your pelvis. Australia once lost a prime minister. As in straight up couldn't find him. They have yet to find him. Shaq only ever hit one 3-point shot. There was once a war between Honduras and El Salvador started by a soccer game. It rains diamonds on Saturn and Jupiter. When I tell people that Bob Marley's father was white, oh the non-believers. People completely shave orangutans and force them into intimacy work. The Mongolian Navy consists of a tugboat with a 7-man crew. Only one of them can swim. The founder of Match.com, Gary Kramen, lost his girlfriend to a man she met on Match.com. Mammoths were alive when the Great Pyramid was being built. Warner Brothers was founded a few months before the fall of the Ottoman Empire. Even crazier is that Nintendo was founded 34 years before it fell. Humans share 50% of their DNA with bananas. France has more time zones than the USA or Russia. For those wondering, it's because France owns a lot of island nations on Earth. Maine is the closest US state to Africa. The current United States flag was designed by then 17-year-old Robert G. Heft, as part of a school project. He received a grade of B. Fortune cookies were invented in America and are seen in China as an American symbol. Gravity propagates at the speed of light. So if the sun were to suddenly disappear, we would continue orbiting for 8 minutes. If there are 23 people in a room, there's a 50% chance 2 of them share a birthday. Blue whales don't have enough blood in their body to get a stiffy, they would pass out from lack of blood in the brain. To compensate, female blue whale womanhood are the size of an average living room. There are more ways to shuffle a deck of cards than there are atoms in our solar system. Cleopatra lived closer in time to the moon landing than she did to the building of the Great Pyramids. There are more public libraries than McDonald's in the US. 7 out of 8 battle deaths in World War II were between the Russians and the Germans. This includes the entire world at the time. The grandsons of 10th US President John Tyler, born 1790, are still living. A day on Venus is longer than a year on Venus. Hippo milk is pink. That's right, pink. Your body is creating an unaliving 15 million red blood cells per second. The Champawat tiger was a female Bengal tiger responsible for an estimated 430 deaths in Nepal and India. Photographs taken of the Eiffel Tower at night are subject to copyright law. Most toilets flush in E-flat. Less time separates the existence of humans and the Tyrannosaurus rex than the T-Rex and the Stegosaurus. If you could double your money every day, and start with a penny, you would be a millionaire in less than a month.
My boyfriend of 3 years told me he's asexual, and he's no longer okay with me finding women to fulfill my needs. Lovemaking has always been a problem in our relationship. It's always been his way or the highway. He's submissive and I am too, but I would bend over backwards trying to please him. I took the dominant role in the bedroom to please him even though I hated it. I gave up mouth stuff because his facial hair hurt me and sometimes stabbed me causing bleeding and he wasn't okay with shaving. I always made sure he got off even if it usually took 3 hours, and for the longest time I was okay with that. I was on birth control for most of our relationship and it killed my intimate drive. So I was okay with it. And as a side note, after realizing I'd never get pain-free mouth with him, we sat down and came up with a solution. I was free to find other women to sleep with. Just no men. Okay, no problem. I don't really find most men attractive anyway. This will be important later. But for the past 2 years I found myself thinking there was something wrong with me. And for most of this relationship there's been times where I've looked in the mirror and thought, am I ugly? Is that why he doesn't want to try? Before I found out it was the birth control causing lack of libido and dryness down there, he led me to believe it was more of a me problem than a am problem. I went to countless doctor's appointments until I finally switched gynos and was told it is in fact the birth control. So I stopped it, and my intimate drive came back with a vengeance. And can you guess what he said when I told him how hot and bothered I've been? That sounds like a lot of work. Ugh. Then he told me he's asexual. At first I was relieved. Like okay, this is a him problem. But hey, I still can sleep with women so it's not like I'm being forced into celibacy. But then we were talking this weekend and I mentioned I had plans to meet up with someone. And he told me he's no longer okay with it after seeing how easy it is for me to get a date. Now I'm seriously debating if this relationship is even worth it. I've stayed because outside of the bedroom we're great. But considering how getting him to talk about the intimacy problems are like pulling teeth, and now he wants me all to himself, I'm torn. I can't be in a relationship without lovemaking. I can't be with a partner who won't communicate. I also made a mistake and got him a job where I work. And our finances are intertwined. I feel so stuck. And I doubt he gives a crap since it's all about him. My awful mother-in-law told my husband that I cheated on him and wants to DNA test my baby, so I said that I'll get a test when she gets a test for her son. I met my husband Stephen at a friend's party. We instantly connected and started dating not long after. We have been happily married for 5 years now and have a 4-month-old son. I met my mother-in-law at his uncle's funeral, and he asked me to attend in support of him. Before we left, his cousin warned me about mother-in-law. He said she wasn't the nicest person, she had impossibly high standards to meet, and can be judgmental, so don't take it personally, as she's like that with everyone. I did ask my husband and he agreed that mother-in-law can be quite judgmental, but not to worry, that he will be there for me. I felt like they gave me the sugar-coated version of her because she was terrible. She made a scene about bringing a stranger to a family funeral, but my husband cut her off and said his aunt, who was his uncle's widow, said he could. She spent the rest of the funeral giving me nasty looks and making passive-aggressive comments. She made a scene at our wedding, but that's a different story on its own. But after minimal contact with mother-in-law, my husband eventually got around to telling her that I was pregnant. I expected her to be angry and have a go at him. But she surprised us both and was the complete opposite. She was excited about being a grandmother. She congratulated us. Her attitude did a complete turn and I grudgingly allowed her to visit. When it was time to give birth to my son, she wanted to see my son being born, but I refused. That's when her ugly side reared its head again and she caused a scene and was thrown out. I refused to let her visit us at home, and my husband agreed. But she rang crying and apologizing. She said she was just overwhelmed about being a grandmother and her emotions got the better of her. Against my better judgment, I relented and said okay. When she first held him she looked at me and said he was beautiful. I went into the kitchen to get us a drink and then I could hear my husband telling her to get out. I went back in, she started yelling he needed to get the baby tested because he doesn't look like anyone in their family. He kicked her out. She took to SM and told everyone that I cheated on my husband and that my husband needed to get a DNA test to prove he was the dad. She got a lot of attention for that. So I made my post and said I'll get a test when she gets a test for her son. That just made everything worse. She rang my husband up telling him to take it down. He just hung up on her. Everyone divided and questioned my husband's paternity since she had such a strong reaction to it. Now even my husband is starting to wonder and making me feel I went too far, and I'm thinking, am I the a-hole for saying that? My narcissistic sister-in-law claims she and my husband were EFF buddies growing up. I'm getting married to my fiancé of over 3 years. I get along really well with his parents and siblings, ever since when we first started dating. I asked his sisters to be bridesmaids and his brothers are groomsmen. All his siblings acted happy and normal still except his sister, M. When we first started dating his sister was cool with me, but as soon as we got engaged she flipped a switch. It started with her storming off when we announced our engagement, Christmas time last year. She apologized and said it made her feel bad about her recent relationship, lots of therapy and issues going on, and accepted being a bridesmaid anyway. She's gone from being friendly to, gradually, ignoring me anytime she sees me but also remaining involved in wedding activities like when I went dress shopping and had my bridal shower. She criticizes everything about the wedding every step of the way, out loud. My future mother-in-law and fiancé have both called her out on her behavior but it doesn't help. I've confronted her about this gently, I don't do well with conflict, and asked if I did anything wrong. She denies anything is wrong and brushes me off. Fast forward to last Sunday, Em asked me to grab coffee out of the blue. She said she's given a lot of thought to admitting this part of her life to someone, but felt she had to. She said that she and fiancé fooled around and eventually had intimacy which continued for a bit but stopped years ago before me. She said she can't help but feel the only reason they stopped was because society gave them no choice and that anything besides what they swore would be a secret couldn't exist. According to her, they stopped when fiancé moved out of his parents' house. I don't believe one word of it. I just couldn't take any more. I freaked out and told her she's lying. I told her to never speak to me again and that she will not be allowed anywhere near my wedding. I told my fiancé and he was shocked. I told him I don't want her at our wedding and I know it hurt him. He didn't push back but he said it's going to cause a lot of family issues and they're going to tear her apart if they find out what she told/did to me. He called her and lost it on her. He asked me to give it a little bit of time before I pull the plug on her being in the wedding even though it's warranted and that it's ultimately my decision but he does want her there. I have a lot of anxiety from this building up and I don't want her there at this point. Who even says something like that? But I just feel guilty because I know that I can't remove her quietly from the wedding. That she's going to be his only sibling not there and not in photos, etc. I don't even know how we would explain it to family. It's been a couple days and she hasn't reached out but I'm just so confused because it's next month and I don't want this to blow up last minute. Update: had a lot of people call me out for flipping out on Em during coffee and not keeping my cool to talk to her rationally. So I called her this morning and told her I just want to talk, no anger, no yelling. I went over to her apartment and just told her to tell me what she can. Em said she felt like they always had a mutual attraction to each other when they were teens but didn't do anything. When she went to college she asked to use his desktop since her laptop wasn't fast enough and would leave hints like browser history of that kind of taboo porn and then eventually just leave the page up that she was watching. I guess without going into specifics she said they supposedly started this when she was 19 and right before his 21st. Said it continued until he moved out at 23. She asked him if he wanted to do mutual touching himself with her and it lasted for a few months before she said it escalated to touching the other and eventually intimacy. So they both lived at home at this point and mother-in-law has always been stay at home. Their parents like poker and still go to a weekly game at a friend's house. According to Em, they had a specific day a week for this back then and they did this on that night when parents were away. Besides that time frame they would coordinate if a home alone opportunity could happen. I asked her if she can give me any text proof or anything and she said she has none. I asked if anyone in the family knows or can confirm any of this. She said no one found out and they never came close to being caught. I asked if this kind of relationship happened with other siblings and she seemed offended at me asking that and said that it's not a kink but just a specific attraction to one person which happened to be her brother. At this point I got super upset again and told her she's not giving me any proof besides her word and that her brother is denying it. I told her I'm going to go to mother-in-law with this information today. She told me she'd deny it to anyone and that this is the last time she will talk about this to me. She just wanted me to know that if they weren't siblings and forced to stop he probably wouldn't be getting married to me. As I was leaving she told me that his parts curved to the right. My body got cold because it's true. I know that it's not unheard of for family members to have seen private parts by accident or like when they're young but it's only really noticeable when he's erect. So I have a lot of dread right now and I need to figure this out. I told my mother-in-law that I have to speak to her. I just can't process or deal right now. I do not know how to confront my fiancé with the new information and I didn't even tell him I was going to see Em again. I will tell him I'm going to speak to mother-in-law today though. Update: after talking to my sister-in-law yesterday morning, I reached out to my mother-in-law and told her I had to have an urgent face-to-face that evening. I was planning on going there with my fiancé, if he'd come with me. Mother-in-law called me a little while before my fiancé got home and she was super upset. She said Em talked to her and that she needed us to come over when he got home. Fiancé came home and I told him I went to see Em again. He told me that his mom called him and told him Em went to talk to her and that we have to go see her immediately. He got upset but wasn't mad. He asked what happened and I told him she doubled down on their situation being true and gave me specific examples. He got visibly sad and upset and said he couldn't handle hearing specifics of whatever she came up with and that we need to go. I was pretty much sobbing at this point. We went over mother-in-law's and father-in-law and Em were there. Mother-in-law was crying, Em was crying. Apparently Em confessed what she told me, and that it was all a lie on her part. She apologized to me and told me she's in a very dark place right now and can't mentally handle anyone else's happiness and the wedding coming up made her feel like everyone else was happy and she was losing her family. She said that her relationship with her ex is over and that they stopped working on it a while ago and she can't cope. She said that I don't have to forgive her or ever be near her, that she's not coming to the wedding and taking time away from everyone to go to therapy. I quietly asked her about how she knew about the physical specifics. She said she saw a picture once when she was snooping through his stuff. A lot more was said, but mainly just things she's dealing with in her mental health. Mother-in-law hugged me and told me that she can't imagine what I must have thought of her family and that Em may never be able to rebuild a relationship or trust with me again, but that she's thankful for us and that she's going to help her daughter get better. When we left, he asked me what I meant by physical specifics, and I said that she knew he had a curve down there. We did a lot more talking after between the two of us last night when we got home, but he said that he couldn't stomach whatever. The details were, she told me. We're both exhausted and he's at work today. It's been a week since Em started this and it's been hell.
What did you witness that changed you forever? Our beach has a long pier that runs along the bay and then turns 90 degrees and juts out into the lake, and swimming off of this pier, which is owned by the federal government, not our park, is prohibited. This is because there are undertows that push against the pier, there are slabs of the old pier beside it that aren't visible a couple feet below the water, and there are no lifeguards out there to make sure people are safe. Just a complete cluster of reasons to not jump off of it. On June 17, 2012, on Father's Day, at around 4:30 p.m., we get a call from our park office that 911 dispatch has called them saying people were calling in a drowning off the pier. I run from our diving channel 40 kilos of equipment, backboard, medical bag, and a radio, and get the attention of my sister, another veteran guard, and my head lifeguard, who are returning from kicking people off the closed auxiliary beach, and we take off towards the pier. It is over 90 degrees outside, and while running with this equipment, I literally second-degree burned my feet and cut it on a broken beer bottle while running. The adrenaline drowned out the pain. The man was already gone, but we are unable to make a death call, so the head lifeguard takes over compressions while a new lifeguard gives rescue breaths. He forgets his latex gloves and later has to go through a battery of tests because the victim was covered in vomit as his body tried to evacuate the water from his lungs. A couple volunteers on the local police boat pull up, the victim is placed on board, and taken to the boat launch where one of the ambulances is pulled up to receive him. Another ambulance at first tried to back up to the end of the break wall, the part that runs along the bay, but their rig got stuck. It was fortunate, however, because during all this craziness a child was horribly bitten by a dog in the picnic area and the EMTs were able to respond to that while we dealt with this. By the time it's all over, I'm limping back to the first aid station with the med bag on my back, and bleeding heavily all over the pier. The victim's family is sobbing and panicking. He was 27 years old and intoxicated at the time, and his family had encouraged him to jump, and not knowing he had no ability to swim, the water was deep in the area he jumped into. Our two brand new 17-year-old lifeguards are crying hysterically because it's their second day on the job. When we get back to the first aid station, the AED housing compartment is broken on the floor because the assistant head lifeguard tore it apart to get the AED from it in his haste. Our head lifeguard closed the beaches and sent everyone home sans the two lifeguards who were not involved. One stayed on the beach and another at the diving channel to make sure no one drowns/gets hurt during emergencies. He stayed along with them and kept people out of the water. The rest of us went home. It was a horrible night, between the empty feeling that there was nothing we could do, and the pain in my feet. I had blood blisters and cuts from the glass that got infected from the seagull shit I had tracked through. It was not a fun day. My sister didn't return back the next summer. My mom took my cheating ex-girlfriend's side over mine and I can never forgive her. I was raised by single mom. My dad passed 2 years after I was born. I focused on my career for the most part of my life and my mom supported me doing that. But when I was 20 I met my ex-girlfriend and we got together. We were colleagues first, but she told me she'd work in a different sector soon. In her new workplace she met a new guy who she fell in love with while being in a relationship with me. I only found out because she admitted to making love with him to me after she went out for girls' night with her friends. I immediately broke up with her and threw her out. A few hours of me trying to process what happened, my mom called me and shouted at me that she hasn't raised me like this. I was confused and asked what she meant, and she said that my ex-girlfriend accused me of cheating on her and that she found proof of that on my phone. I couldn't believe what I just heard. I tried to talk to my mother telling her that the exact opposite is true and that she has cheated on me, but she didn't believe me. Part of the reason is probably because she and my mom truly loved each other. I never had a problem with that. Till then I liked how they got along with each other. My mother called me a liar and she said she'd disinherit me from her will as she's not having a cheater as a son. She said she never wants to see me again. Then later my grandparents called me to tell me how disappointed they are of me and that I deserve every bad thing that is to come. You know what the worst thing was? I found out that my cheating ex-girlfriend continued to meet with my mom after everything she did. All of this was so painful for me. The only person that sided with me was my best friend who was furious with her. I talked to him and he hugged me and I cried in his arms. I know many people would think that's unusual for two guys, but his support really helped me getting through this. 1 year later when I already was over it, my doorbell rang and when I opened I saw my mom with teary eyes and I began to feel how my emotions are coming up and I slammed the door and started crying, asking her what the F she wants here. She said she wanted to talk to me and that she was so sorry. After she begged for 15 minutes straight I gave in and opened the door. She said my ex admitted that she cheated when she was drunk. She apologized profusely and said that she knows that she failed as a mother not believing her own child. I told her that I accept her apology but I don't want to see her now and that I probably can never forgive her, even though she begged me to forgive her. Over the last few months she started calling me daily just to hear my voice, as she said. She said she missed me, then apologized again and asked if I could just come over. Her voice always sounded kinda painful and she always says how much she loves me and that even she could understand that I hate her. She cannot live with this thought on her head. I don't even hate her, I still love her. She is still my mom, but the trust is broken. I can never trust her again because what if I got into a relationship again? Who says that she wouldn't just believe their word over mine again? I appreciate her efforts but I just cannot forgive her or even see her now. And I hope she understands that I need time. What is your sad love story? When we were both school children we met, spent all of our free time together and became inseparable. We first kissed at age 9 and were boyfriend/girlfriend in that cute school age way. We stayed that way until she moved away age 15. It killed us both but she had no choice. Her dad was in the military and got posted abroad. We stayed in touch, writing letters, telling each other how much we loved each other and missed each other, every week without fail. Then she wrote me the best letter I've ever had. She was coming back home. She was 18 and decided to come back to study at the university local to me. She was so happy. I was so happy. We truly were soulmates. She told me she wanted us to be married as soon as possible. The minute she landed back on UK soil, she called me from the airport. This was a long time before mobiles or the internet. Just a quick call to say she was back and that she loved me and would be seeing me in 4 hours time. Those 4 hours were the longest of my life. And then that stretched into 6 hours, 10, 24, a few days, a week. I was utterly frantic, no news. Then I saw her family moving into the same house they'd left all those years ago. I ran up to her older sister, begging her to tell me what was going on. She'd been killed in a car crash on the motorway coming back to me. Her family, in their grief and pain, never called me to tell me, gone forever. All I have now is photos, letters and memories. That was over 30 years ago. I'm still not over her. I've loved, even been married but no one else ever came close. She was the one. I still dream of her, not every night, not even every week but at least once a month. My Rachel.
My parents are jeopardizing my future to benefit my sister. My parents set up a college fund for my sister, never told me, and refused to help me. I'm left wondering why, as if they're denying me the chance to shape my own future. I'm a junior in college, 20M, majoring in economics with a minor in mathematics. My family has always been poor, so I knew getting into and affording college would be a challenge. On the other hand, I knew college was my best shot. I started working at 15 and pretty much worked my way through high school to save money. I penny pinched in every possible way to save up as much as I could. I remember it was homecoming, and I asked my dad to buy me a new outfit, but he said no. I could have bought it myself, but I opted to borrow clothes to avoid spending. Despite working, I managed to maintain a high GPA, engage in extracurricular activities. Basically, I did everything to secure my college spot. And I got a merit-based scholarship. When I accepted my current college offer, I thoroughly examined the package. The scholarship is good, but I knew I couldn't rely on my parents' help, so I did some serious thinking and figured I could graduate as long as I worked. Sure, I'll graduate with debt, but I thought it would be manageable. College has proven tougher than I thought. I have to maintain a high GPA due to the scholarship, and I work long hours, no breaks during exam weeks. I even do some jobs on weekends. My parents only help me with $200 per month. To my surprise, my sister, 17F, mentioned this week that our parents set up a college fund for her. I was taken aback by the considerable amount in it. I questioned my parents about this. They said they only managed to save recently, that they know my sister's life will be tougher as a woman, so they decided to provide her with this help. I found this extremely unfair. Ever since high school, I couldn't dedicate myself solely to studying. My dream was to earn a PhD in economics, but how can I achieve that while dealing with these loans? A professor even told me they think I have research potential and would excel in a PhD. I feel like the future I wanted is being snatched away because my parents favor my sister. I asked my parents for half of the money in her fund. They vehemently refused to give it to me. This feels incredibly unfair. They still have her entire high school year to save, and they can support her through college much more than they've supported me so far. Did I do something wrong? Do they hate me? I'm asking myself these questions to understand why this is happening. Just that half of the fund would help me immensely. I could, for instance, apply for a PhD in the future without worrying as much about how I'd pay off my loans. My husband cheated on me and my narcissistic son kept it a secret because he wanted a new phone. Now he's begging to reconnect after 10 years of no contact. My son was the best thing to ever happen to me and I gave him everything he wanted. He and I were really close and I never had a doubt in my mind that I would not be alone in this world as long as I have him. That is until 10 years ago. My husband had been cheating on me with a younger woman, but that wasn't even the worst part. My son knew and he had hid the affair from me. I was devastated about the fact I was betrayed by the two people I care most about in this world. I asked why he hurt me so much and his response only broke me more. He had found out about the affair and when his dad begged him not to tell me, he asked for a new phone and promised he would keep this a secret if he bought him gifts. I was totally blindsided when I learned my husband took my son to meet that woman. They made excuses that they went on a ski trip and they took his mistress with them. I was devastated and I knew it would take a long time for me to heal from this. But things only kept getting worse. In the divorce ruling, my son chose my ex over me. He didn't even want to visit me after it was all done. I always tried to reach out to him but I kept getting denied. He told me he didn't want me to be his mom anymore and he preferred his stepmom because she was cooler. At that point I gave up and went on with my life. But I never forgot about him. I would always wonder how he was doing and as the years passed by, I would get sad all over again about how things went down. Since he didn't want me in his life, the best thing I could do was move on and focus on me. I put the past behind me and I eventually met a wonderful man who was a single father to 2 girls. Those girls loved me like I was their own mother and I realized how terribly I missed being a mom. Him and his girls were everything I needed. We eventually got married and then I got pregnant. I was so happy that I could have a kid of my own again and I was excited to give my stepdaughters a new baby sister. But all I could think about during that pregnancy was how I wanted to meet my son and tell him he is going to be a brother to a baby girl. I never did though, and no matter how much love I received, deep down I was still miserable about what happened. And then I gave birth. I almost died on the spot after my daughter was born and the only thing on my mind was my son. I still wanted to meet him, but I knew he did not want to see me, so I just gave up the idea. I talked to my husband about how I was feeling and he was sad that I still held some attachment to my past after everything that happened, but he ultimately understood because that was my son and he was my son for 15 years before he stabbed me in the back. My husband promised me that he would never let me experience that type of pain ever again, and he reassured me that his girls wouldn't want anyone else as their mom. That gave me so much comfort and I put all my blood, sweat, and tears into all 3 of my girls and my husband. Over the years, the memories of my son just became vague as I immersed myself into my new family. My life was seemingly perfect, but I should have learned that good things never last. Because just a week ago, my son sent me a series of messages talking about missing me and wanting to meet up. To say I was surprised was an understatement. I wondered why he wanted to see me after 10 years of no contact. I was suspicious and I didn't even feel excited about this turn of events. As a mother, I knew I should have been over the moon, but I was not. I told my husband about this and he said it was up to me whether I wanted to meet him or not, while my parents said I deserved closure from him, so I needed to go see him. I didn't think I could handle reliving that trauma all over again. After thinking about it for hours on end, I asked him to meet me in a public park. Seeing him again made the time apart feel so real. He was not the same 15-year-old he once was. He was a man. He was all grown up. I won't lie, I wanted to cry but held my composure. It was really awkward for the first few minutes and we were just engaging in small talk. I was so nervous though, and then he said,
"You must be wondering why I contacted you."
The answer broke me beyond belief. I didn't get any type of closure and I couldn't even mentally prepare for what he was going to say. I just wish I had never gone to meet him because it was just heartbreak after heartbreak with my son. He said,
"I need $20K from you because I want to go to law school and my dad can't afford it."
His dad lost a lot of his money a few years ago due to a loss on his business and his company was bankrupt. He also had 3 more kids with his mistress wife. I felt myself going numb. I couldn't even begin to process what was going on. After 10 years I was finally meeting him. I was hoping that we could reconcile and he would understand what I have been through, or maybe my husband was lying to him. But no, he just wants money from me. I told him I cannot give him money, not such a huge amount. He got defensive and kept saying why not? And then he asked,
"Is this about Dad's affair? Geez, when will you get over it?"
I asked him, why do you hate me? What have I done to deserve your hatred? Have I ever raised my voice? Have I ever hit you or said no to you? Then why? You always pushed me away when I tried to get closer to you? Why and what did I do to deserve it? He took a deep breath and answered,
"You don't understand, Mom. You really expected me to come with you? You had nothing. At least my dad could afford the lifestyle I wanted and my friends actually liked my stepmom. Everything was fine until you discovered Dad's affair and my deal with him. I get it, you didn't hit me or scold me, but you were not able to afford the life I wanted."
I asked him if he really thinks his father's affair was actually the best way for any of us. I sacrificed a lot for him and yet he chose someone who he only met when he was 14. He said he doesn't want to talk about that because it was so many years ago and I should just drop it. I asked him why he never visited me and if it was his dad who tried to stop him from seeing me. He responded that he never wanted anything to do with me because I was poor and nothing I had ever given him was of any real, monetary value. He called me cheap and annoying, then said he was glad he had his stepmom because I was an embarrassment to him. I had enough at that point and put my foot down. I was firm with him that I wasn't going to give him any money. He got really defensive and said I owed it to him for ruining his life. I was shocked that I was getting the blame for something his dad had done. I had been through so much because of both of them, but he rolled his eyes and told me he didn't want to hear my life story, he just wanted the money that he knew I had. I said that according to him, I was poor so he needs to go to his stepmom because she's clearly richer than I am. He got really mad and yelled that they were all broke and he needed my money. I did not want to be his ATM, I wanted to be his mother, but he rejected me more times than I could count. I was not going to get mistreated and taken for granted again. I told him no and went to leave. I heard him calling me a bitch and said he was glad my ex cheated on me because I was a horrible person. I cried all the way back home and I regretted ever seeing him again. I couldn't believe the man my son turned out to be, he was just a money-hungry person.
After decades, my engagement ring finds its way to its rightful owner, my ex-husband's daughter. My ex-husband and I married young. It was a classic white wedding with vows and the tradition of passing down a family ring. My ex was given his great-grandmother's wedding ring to give on our wedding day. We had a wonderful start, but we both really weren't ready to settle. He cheated on me, and my drinking turned into alcoholism. We divorced. The ring was never really discussed, so I've kept it all this time. We married at 19 and divorced at 20. Luckily, we didn't have kids. We went our separate ways. He found someone, remarried, and had a girl and a boy. My journey has been harder. Alcoholism took many things from me, but I kept that old wedding ring. Even during some very difficult times. I never lost it, sold it, or pounded. Even though my marriage ended, it was my memory of a better time. I've gotten myself clean, and so far I'm on a long winning streak getting my life back together. Through the gossip lines, I found out my ex is still married and his daughter, their oldest, just got engaged. I still have his great-grandmother's ring. Before we even got married, he and I had a conversation about how he wanted to one day pass it on to his daughter. We haven't spoken to one another in years. I don't know if he still wants his daughter to have this ring. Maybe he's forgotten about it. I feel conflicted about what to do. We didn't have a good ending. We were so young, stupid, and mutually overly entitled. Still, I would want to do the right thing. Should I get in touch with him? Should I mail it as a wedding gift with a card anonymously? Or should I say it's for me? I will definitely get in touch with him and let him decide where we go from here. Hopefully he'll want to meet. It would be nice to see him after all these years. I had the ring professionally cleaned at a jeweler and was given a pretty box to put it in. While I was there, I ordered myself a ring. Instead of an insect diamond, I gave mine a ruby. It was my grandmother's name, and she never gave up on me. And it seemed fitting considering the other ring belonged to a great-grandmother. I decided to have the word forward engraved in it. It may sound cliché, but that's how I've made it here to where I am now. By moving forward. My ex lives about 2 hours from town. I had a girlfriend come with me. First, we drove by his house and there weren't any cars, so we grabbed lunch and tried again. This time someone was home. I had my friend go up to the door and knock. I saw him open the door. She handed him the package, and pretty much headed straight back to the car. She told me he didn't say much. He seemed a bit confused. But I thanked her, and that was it. I didn't get to see if it made him happy or if he called his mother saying the ring had found its way home. I imagine him beaming while explaining the ring to his wife as he passes it to his daughter. Thinking about it warms my heart. I imagine a lot of crying and hugging. I had a note with it. I wrote, "It's been an honor and privilege to be part of this ring's history. Please accept it back with best wishes to your family and to your daughter's engagement." In a way, I kind of like not knowing how everyone reacted. I can daydream about it. My own fairy tale. I didn't include any way to contact me, just my name. I found him and feel that if he wants to, he'll find me. But I don't see much point. Our time was short and it ended. And this is probably the best closure I ever expected. It makes my heart lighter.
What are some very comforting facts? Jupiter gravitational mass is so immense modern science believe it's been protecting us from meteors for millions of years. It's highly likely your pet dreams of you in their sleep. We are made of star matter. That has always comforted me. Bees take naps in flowers. So yeah, it's okay to need a nap, even busy bees do. Van Gogh didn't start painting until his late 20s. J.K. Rowling didn't publish Harry Potter until her late 30s. Samuel L. Jackson didn't get his first big role until his 40s. It's never too late to be who you might have been. If you make it to the airport without dying, you've already passed the deadliest part of plane travel. 1. A penguin was once knighted in Norway. 2. Blind people can smile even though they have never seen one. It is human nature. Smile. 3. The voice actors of Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse got married in real life. People see you 20% more attractive than you see yourself.
What was the moment you stopped the friendship with your best friend? I have 2 daughters, and my best friend was the mother of my younger daughter's bestie. We did everything together for years, sometimes with the kids and sometimes without. I could count on her pitching in when we had a problem, and I spent many hours on the phone listening to her rant about various impediments for her goals of improving her already wealthy lifestyle. She was a functional alcoholic, married to a brilliant professor, who did everything right and tried to train me in the ways of the educated elite upper class. Among other things, as an alcoholic it bothered her that I barely drank while she could drink a pitcher or 2 of margaritas for lunch. Then my older daughter suffered a traumatic brain injury. That, along with a hormonal dysfunction, PCOS, made her high school years exceedingly difficult. She was suicidal for some of them, and my focus was in keeping her alive. I let her drop out of school. She got her GED with no difficulty later, and I simply stayed home with her, working from home when I could. My friend helped with young daughter, letting her spend the night with her bestie, but she became increasingly angry with me. She believed that I simply needed to be stricter with my older daughter, and that would cure her, or else I should send her to a psych ward so they could fix her and get on with my life. It was a fissure that eventually ended things. Older daughter moved out the day she turned 18, got a job and became a full adult. A few years later she became unexpectedly pregnant. Unexpected because her endocrinologist had told her she was completely infertile and they had used protection. She decided to keep the baby. I believe every child should be greeted with love and joy, and she moved back home after the baby's father walked out on her. We were thrilled to have our new addition to the family. When young daughter told my best friend the news, her response was, "That's too bad. Does she even know who the father is?" Young daughter came home so angry that she was crying. I called a former friend and told her that I was done with her. She called me several times when she was wasted to tell me how unfair I was being, but taking that vacation from her made me realize how much I was tired of her constant judging and efforts to improve me. I moved on and never looked back. What's the scariest thing you've ever seen while stopped at a red light? TLDR, I made a driver very angry after what I did. I was working as a home care physical therapist and my days usually ran from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., with gaps during the day between visits which I would fill with errands, lunch, etc. For context, I was not the keeper of the cleanest car at the time. 60 hours per week in the car and I usually would wait and do a good clean out once every 2 to 3 weeks. There were usually fast food bags, blank patient notes, toys. I worked pediatrics. On this particular day, I stopped for coffee on my way to my first house, and when I returned to the car I realized that the second cup holder had the remains of yesterday's coffee in it. Wanting to get rid of the superfluous cup, I opened my window. When I got to the first stoplight on my continuing journey, I took the old coffee cup and dumped it out my window, straight down, probably getting some on the outside of my white Prius, which mixed in well with the dirt and pollen. The cup ended up on the passenger side floor amongst Wawa and McDonald's wrappers. I am not proud of that. What I wasn't prepared for was the loud anger from the pristine black lifted pickup truck next to me. The father of this shiny testament to his manhood started screaming at me that I threw my coffee at his precious truck. He got out of his vehicle and berated me. How dare I throw coffee at his truck? Get out of my car, you coward, blah, blah, blah. I made an attempt to get the guy to look at the splatter pattern. His car was a good 7 to 8 feet from mine and had not been touched. Nor had I been trying to. But amazingly, at 8 a.m., this guy had to have been drunk or high or loaded and was looking for a fight. Being only 5 feet 4 inches, actually on the clock, and not in the mood to fight a crazed lunatic defending his manhood from being within a couple of yards of dumped coffee, I had many reasons not to engage. I told him I wasn't getting out of my car and to just leave me alone. Oh, and yes, I was a coward because he was crazy. I start closing my window, and the guy spits in my face. Light green, I hightailed it out of there. Better to run. I canceled the rest of my day. Y'all got me messed up if you think I'm doing anything but sitting on my couch after that.
I think my star student boyfriend is banging his professor. Do I, 28F, need to worry about my boyfriend's, 24M, friendship with his professor, 25F? My boyfriend, 24, became friends with his former professor, 25, sometime last year. I don't know what to make of it. They seem to be friendly and talk consistently every week, and from what he tells me, it's usually very surface level. Sometime last year after the course ended, my boyfriend, his professor, and some of his male classmates went somewhere to eat together. My boyfriend brought up that he was going to be attending an event, plastic modeling show, and his professor showed interest and invited herself to the event and asked if she could stay at his Airbnb with his friends. My boyfriend and his friends were all okay with it. I unfortunately couldn't attend the event, but from what my boyfriend told me, he and a few of his friends met up at their Airbnb. That same day, his professor comes to my boyfriend's Airbnb and tagged a few of her girlfriends along. I believe they all stayed in the same place. The next day, they go to the event, went to a bar afterwards and got drinks. A lot of them, except my boyfriend, got pretty drunk and my boyfriend took the liberty of being the designated driver for his professor and her friends. His professor won some model kit from the event, and even in her drunken state, asked my boyfriend if he could stay up with her to work on the kit together. From what my boyfriend tells me, nothing else happened that night. After the event, everyone from that group created a group chat and they continue to plan and talk about future events together. Since then, my boyfriend and his friends had met up with his professor and got to meet his professor's fiancée at an anime convention and it sounded like they all got along well. His professor continues to express interest in other events and it sounds like she may be attending another event with my boyfriend and his friends in the near future. I trust my boyfriend and don't think he is hiding anything from me. Honestly speaking, I think it's hard for me to understand their friendship as it is his professor. I've had a conversation with him on this, and he's let me know that I have nothing to worry about. I would like to hear others' opinions and see what y'all think of this friendship. Is this something I need to be concerned about or is it really nothing? The professor was my boyfriend's former professor. She is classified as an adjunct faculty and works as an accountant as her full-time job, which explains why she is a young professor. He was her star student in class. My boyfriend has not graduated college yet and is still a student at his university.
Students, what is the worst mistake you ever made while writing a paper? At the time, I was in an advanced 10th grade literature class that began reading 1984 by George Orwell. While in my veterinary class, I started writing a short summary of the chapter in which Orwell was describing how nobody could actually love or trust each other. However, the only paper I had on me was a sheet that my teacher handed back to us every day but she never actually read it. I used the back of this paper to quickly jot down my thoughts and a rough draft of my summary, thinking that my teacher wouldn't mind. Well, I was wrong. In the summary, I wrote about how effed up the society was, that love and security were an illusion, and how Winston, the protagonist, felt responsible for the way his mother had died. It was messy and rough, really just a way to put my thoughts on paper. I genuinely thought nothing of the blurb until the next day, when I arrived at the tech school. Halfway through class, I was pulled out into the hallway and eventually escorted to the counselor's office. I must be honest, I was about ready to crap myself. It was horrifying. I had never gotten in trouble before, ever. When we arrived at his office, the counselor confronted me with the paper my first draft was on, the same piece of paper that my teacher had collected. He questioned me about my life and demanded an explanation of my supposed cry for help. Both my teacher and counselor, apparently, didn't understand my references to the book and believed what I wrote was my actual opinion on actual society. They took it as the ramblings of a student who wanted to take her own life, writing about how nobody loved them. Both of them didn't know if it was a self-deletion note, a confession, some kind of manifesto, or something else entirely. By now, I was significantly less afraid and more so confused. When I was able to wrap my mind over it, I kind of started laughing. I think this actually scared the counselor even more, because he was still under the assumption I was depressed or, at least, disturbed. I explained to him that it was just an essay draft and he didn't believe me. I guess he never read the book himself? It was just strange. He even had me pull up the completed, final draft of the summary on my laptop. After looking over it, a couple of other chapter summaries, and some more things generally relating to my book report, I think he finally believed me. He handed me back my computer and basically went whoopsies before just walking away.
I effed up by being an a-hole on the internet and I accidentally ruined a stranger's life. 2 weeks ago, someone started shooting off fireworks in my neighborhood at 1 a.m. I've been having bouts of insomnia and was finally able to get to sleep, and I had to get to wake up at 4 a.m. for a meeting 2 hours away that I had to be at for 8 a.m. I was pissed and so were my dogs. I love fireworks but think there's a time and a place. I posted to the neighborhood Facebook group a few hours later during a coffee break about people that set off fireworks at 1 a.m. midweek. After I made the long drive home, I checked my Facebook. Some guy comments that I can't sleep because I'm a fat pig. Now, I'm chubby but not sloppy fat. Plus I just lost the equivalent of a fully grown male wombat, or 54 North American gray squirrels, so I feel awesome about myself. This is where I may have really messed up. I responded to the guy saying, "Listen guy's name, I'm sorry I had to end things, but I just didn't have the same feelings. What you're saying now is just hurtful and mean. Please stop sending me messages, and commenting on my Facebook posts is just a pathetic way to contact me. I told you a dozen times already, we are done. It's over." The following day I had to get to the airport for an out-of-country vacation that had me getting up early and leaving early, so I didn't check my Facebook during all the craziness. I could not check my Facebook even if I wanted to. I was on a cruise not paying $25 per day for internet, and the country we visited didn't really have the greatest Wi-Fi. Besides, I was having a blast leaving the chaos of the world behind. I signed on Monday night and apparently, people took this seriously and told his wife. She was freaking out on me, pleading for information. Sending me messages. Her and his friends were DMing me. He was DMing me. It was bad. The last message was the guy saying I'm a total a-hole because I refused to tell the truth and I just destroyed his life. I immediately messaged both him and his wife explaining what happened. I sent pics of me on vacation even, time-stamped. Apparently, he is a serial cheater, and when I exposed our affair, another woman exposed her affair with the husband to the wife because the affair partner was jealous that he had yet another side chick. This was the straw that broke the camel's back, because not only of the multiple affairs, but because he humiliated her with how public it was. So there's my accidental pro-revenge.
Update: am I the jerk for telling my dad I have no interest in meeting his new family? I've talked to my dad and his fiancée. I told her everything about everything. Their wedding was off for 11 days but now it's back on. She didn't really say much to me about it, she mostly just brushed past it. They want to come out here, where I live, and have dinner with me and my mom. My sister has also agreed to come to the dinner, but now he's talking about coming to stay with him for a little while, and I don't want to do that. I'm a little nervous about the whole thing now, and I just don't want to start another dance with my father that ends badly for me. I don't plan on going to the wedding or any other events that include my dad after the dinner. The only reason that I agreed to go to the dinner was because my sister asked me, not because he asked me. I don't have any interest in having a relationship with my dad, but I do think that it would be healthy if I didn't have any hatred for my dad. I don't want to be in this limbo where I just feel bad for the rest of my life because I have hatred toward my dad, and I felt like this was an easier way to just deal with it and move on and let it go. Update: I had dinner with my father and his new fiancée, as well as her children on the 18th of May. I feel like I got a lot of childhood feelings off of myself. I explained to my father, his fiancée, and her family why I felt the way that I felt, as well as my reasoning for not wanting to come. I told him that I had no intention of being in his life over the necessary amount. My dad did ask me quite a couple times if I was going to be up to go to the wedding. I did agree to go, but I made it clear that I don't want to be involved as an official member in his life, more so someone he might see around the holidays, birthdays, or special events, but other than that I have no intentions of seeing or interacting with him. He seemed fine with that, and it was a perfect solution for me. I've been told by many of you, as well as people in my personal life, that I should just cut him out of my life and move on. I just feel that having unresolved feelings is unhealthy. Not having answers to things that you could have answers seems kind of ridiculous if you have the option to get the answers that you want. My relationship with my father is never going to be great. It's never going to be perfect. It's probably never going to be anything other than okay, because I don't really think I can see him as anything other than a deadbeat dad, but I'm going to try my best to be civil, because I don't want to have any more unresolved feelings with anybody else. I know that it's been over a month since my last update, but during that time I finished my senior year with 4 B's and 4 A's. I turned 18 on 21st of May. I graduated high school and started a new job. It's been a pretty busy month, and so honestly I wasn't even nervous about talking to my father because I felt like it was just so busy that it was just another thing to do, but I'm glad it's over and done with and I can move on with my life. Customers always right? So I work as a minimum wage cashier at a discount store. I see a lot of people in a day, especially people who know how to do my job better than me, due to their lack of experience and profound understanding that my job is the easiest in the world. Now I always shut that shit down, in the classic corporate happy public service employee way. Well, actually it makes it a little easier this way, but thank you so much for helping. Like I'm talking a toddler down from an upcoming tantrum, but I don't leave room for arguing. It's almost like I'm playing a character, honestly. It works for me, but I never just let someone do something stupid, like letting them walk out with a bag too heavy without double bagging it, or letting them leave putting their receipt in their bag if it looks like they might want to return it. But not today. It's Saturday, so it's busy. All day as I would finally get a minute to get my other work done, someone would come up taking forever to consider the impulse buys while I'm stuck waiting for them at the register getting nothing done. This woman did that, but twice. She got up there, pondered for a minute, got a line behind her, decided to go look at something else. I'm stuck with this line till just before she gets back and ponders again before finally getting to me. She's your average looking middle-aged soccer mom, but already she's getting on my nerves. But hey, it's Saturday, every customer gets on my nerves, so whatever. She's got a lot of larger but lightweight items with some smaller items, like bags of candy and socks. So I'm getting half of it in one large bag, half of it in another large bag. So I go to get the second bag, handing her the first one when she goes, "No, I don't want a lot of bags, you can fit the rest in there, it's fine. You should ask before getting more bags. It's your job to do things how the customers want and asking. Otherwise you should just know to do one bag if you can. It's wasteful. I only want one bag." And I thought to myself, wow, it sounds like she's never done retail a day in her life. She must know what she's doing. Now it's also worth noting she had a few heavier items, not many, but a few. They were glass jars of sauces with lots of pigment and staining properties. It's also worth mentioning she was getting some chips that came in bags with pointy sharper edges that eat bags for breakfast. The bag gets too heavy and they press into the sides at any angle and that bag's toast. It's also worth mentioning she was getting several white clothes made of very stainable material. Nice clothes. She said they were for an important party she had to go to that night, bragging. Normally I would double bag, which would keep the sharp corners in check. But she was right, she only wanted one bag, so that must be all she needs. So I get the glass jars in with the clothes, nested in there nicely spaced out where they wouldn't hit each other with clothes between them, and the bags on top spread around the top so it was easier to lift the bag. Just like she wanted. That damn bag was already looking like it would bust wide open any second when she took it from the counter. Luckily, a line hadn't formed behind her yet, just someone looking the impulse buys over, so I couldn't really step away, but nothing to do but watch where I had a clear view of the parking lot. I watched as she struggled out the two front doors, no automatic, got 1/4 of the way to her car when the bag bust. Glass and sauce everywhere, sad she had like $15 worth, about 5 jars. She struggled to force them back into the bag, hoping she could at least pile them in her arms with the bag holding it together, trying not to cut herself on the glass she had wrapped up. It broke some more. She tried to salvage it and balance it back up, failed, gave up, grabbed as much of an armful as she could, had to take like 5 trips or blouse and pants, ruined. Maybe after over a year and a half of cashiering nearly every day, I know what I'm doing? Shocker. All of my friends think my girlfriend is a creep. Hey readers. I, 22, started dating my girlfriend, let's call her Alice, 21, about 7 months ago. We met while working on a group project for one of our college classes. From the moment I met her I felt an instant connection. She was beautiful, smart, and we shared a bunch of common interests. Long story short, we flirted for a few weeks before I finally asked her out, and we've been happily going out since. Now here comes the problem. About a month ago my friends and I were planning to hang out and I invited Alice. While me and Alice are from the same hometown, we met during college and a majority of our relationship has been during the school year. While we know each other's college friends, we'd never met each other's hometown friends. I know that Alice has really bad social anxiety, so I was hesitant to invite her at first, but when I did ask she seemed nervous but really excited. The party seemed to go really well. Alice was smiling and laughing the whole time and even got to go on a rant about a topic she really liked. When it was over she even told me while I was taking her home how much she liked my friends. When I asked my friends what they thought of Alice, they all said she seemed nice. All except my best friend Ruben, 22 male. When I asked him, he told me that he hated her. I immediately questioned why. Hoping it was them not mixing well, as I can acknowledge that Ruben and Alice are complete opposites when it comes to interests and personality, but Ruben told me he hated her because of how creepy she is and I was better off dumping her. Now this threw me off as I had never once considered Alice creepy. She's actually the cutest girl I'd ever met and I've never felt more comfortable around someone as I do around her. Before I could even ask what he meant, he went off on a rant about how uncomfortable she made him and started citing stories I told him about our dates during college. Stuff like how she'd stare at me without saying anything and just enjoyed looking at me, how she eat the same meals whenever we went to dinner, how unjealous she was when a girl came up and flirted with me, or about her deep knowledge of poisons and love for murder mysteries and true crime. Both of which she could talk about for hours, but neither of which she actually talked about at the party. He said that while he wrote them off before since they didn't seem to bother me, which they don't, but that after meeting her in person and seeing how weird and flighty she was, he can tell that she's a secret psycho and will end up either breaking my heart or physically hurting me. I tried to explain to him how weird it was, probably just because she was nervous about meeting them for the first time, but he insisted that we've had friends SOs have anxiety before and it was that she was plain weird. I blew him off at first cause he sounded effing crazy. Alice isn't perfect but she's far from creepy, but after 2 weeks of him telling me to dump her and me getting tired of telling him to drop it. I reached out to a few of our friends to prove him wrong, but to my surprise they all agreed that Alice was creepy. Most of them said that the way she spoke really threw them off, which is fair since Alice can be weirdly formal sometimes, but I didn't notice her doing that at the party at all and typically it's much more funny than unsettling. Most of my friends told me it wasn't enough to break up with her since they still genuinely found her sweet and fun to be around, but I did have one other friend say it was worth breaking up over and he was just too embarrassed to tell me at first. I have no plans of breaking up with Alice because all the stuff they're calling creepy I find cute when she does, but are they right? Is it creepy she does that stuff? Should I talk to her about it? Should I just tell my friends to F off and ignore their concerns? I feel bad for even questioning about this, but with all my friends agreeing it's starting to gnaw at me, and I just need some clarification if it's actually creepy or if they're just being dramatic. All of my friends think my girlfriend is a creep. I'm glad y'all agree that the stuff Alice is doing wasn't really creepy. Anyway, to get into the meat of this update. Since I posted originally, I spoke with each of my friends individually and talked to them about what they said. Pretty much all of them apologized and some even offered to apologize to Alice herself, which at the time I said no to since I didn't really want them interacting with her, but we'll get back into that later. The only one who didn't apologize, as I'm sure you guessed, was Ruben. I want to address some comments suggesting that Ruben could either be attracted to me or maybe even Alice. I don't think either of those are true as Alice is the first girlfriend Ruben has ever acted like this with, even though I've dated plenty of girls, and Alice isn't his usual type. He may still be attracted to her, I mean she is effing gorgeous, but I've known the guy since 3rd grade and so I know he's pretty picky about the girls he's with. So I don't think it's that I think he's just a major PP. I've known Ruben literally my whole life, since our moms were college friends and moved close to each other when we were young. With so much history I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt by just asking him to drop it since I really didn't care if he found her creepy. I really liked her and he'd just have to deal with it if he wanted to continue being friends. He didn't apologize or even say he was wrong, but he did agree to stop commenting on it. Which isn't perfect but works for now as I consider if I really want to continue to be friends with him. Yesterday I met up with Alice for a casual date. It wasn't anything fancy, just a home picnic. I have really bad allergies so we couldn't do it outside. We had some candles and our favorite foods and we watched movies and dissected our favorite tropes. About halfway through our 3rd movie Alice brought up Ruben since she heard about an upcoming car show/auction her dad told her about, and she remembered me saying that he loved vintage cars and suggested the 3 of us and a friend of hers who was also into cars could go together, so she could get to know him better. It felt crazy that she suggested this days after mine and Ruben's fight, and it made me feel sick with how sweet she was being such a jerk. I gave some weak excuses about how she hates car shows and doesn't have to do that or how Ruben wouldn't be comfortable doing that. My girlfriend being the angel she was said she could tough through it or even just let me and Ruben go together if he wasn't comfortable with her yet, and she'd even pay for the tickets cause it was a private showing. This was the point I broke and told her everything that happened. She took it really well, just calmly listening while I rambled through my explanation and even ended up apologizing to me about weirding out her friends. I tried to explain it wasn't her fault and she didn't need to apologize. As a lot of you suspected, she ended up telling me how she believed she was autistic, but since she hadn't gotten an official diagnosis so she wasn't comfortable telling people. After a lot of guiltily back and forth between the two of us, she told me she didn't want me cutting off my friends since they did apologize and didn't say anything cruel, just pointed out her neurodivergent tendencies, which aren't an insult to her, but I put my foot down that I for sure won't be bringing her around Ruben anymore and plan to distance myself from him and my other friends for the time being, which she agreed was fair. She also wants to meet up with my friends who want to apologize to her since they seem genuine in their regret. Overall, things turned out pretty well and thank you all so much for your input.
What happened in school that still pisses you off when you think about it today? A girl in 3 of my classes was allowed by the administration to have her cell phone during classes because her father was dying. I was aware of the situation since it was happening for a week since she often had little breakdowns. One day, in first period, her phone vibrates while the teacher is talking. He disregards that fact that she'll allowed to have her phone and demands she hand it over to him. I believe he said something along the lines of, "I'll read it, and if it's not your mother then I'm keeping it her phone," for the rest of the class because it rang while I was talking. Well, the girl flips out, starts crying as soon as she sees her phone screen. She said no, she's leaving. This starts a standoff between the teacher and her. He ends up blocking the doorway while still demanding her phone. His logic was if he didn't know it was her mom texting her then he can't let her leave. At this point, she's inconsolable and everyone in the class is screaming at him to let her go. Like, "If you're complex dude, let her go." And he's screaming back, "I'm in charge here." To the point the class made so much noise that security came in to see what was going on. Security tells the girl just go to the office. Her dad did die that day and she wasn't in school for a month. The teacher had a leave of absence as well and we had a sub the rest of the year. From then on, students were not allowed special circumstances for cell phones and teachers were not allowed to block students from leaving. The real kicker is this was intro to photography and most students were there because we had to take a mandatory elective. F you, Mr. M, you were a D to that poor girl who only wanted to see her dad one more time. I'm mad just typing this out.
What is an insane coincidence that you've experienced? I know that no one is going to believe this story, but it did happen, I promise. I was born and lived for the first 20 years of my life in Montreal. My parents had friends, the Rabinoviches, who were childless. They were lovely people, and although they had been through the Holocaust and lost their entire family, never complained about life. They were super nice to me. I moved abroad to Israel and one day my mother called me that Mr. Pesach Rabinovich had passed away. She said that his wife Leah was traveling with the coffin to Israel as he had requested to be buried in Israel and had asked if I could wait for her at the airport as she had no one she really knew in Israel. Knowing that no other family would be waiting for them, of course I readily agreed and went to the Ben Gurion airport to wait. Their flight was due from Montreal at 2 p.m. I came to the special place where the deceased are brought. Obviously, they don't bring out coffins together with all the passengers in the regular arrivals hall. Another man was waiting there, too. I asked him if he was also waiting for the coffin of Pesach Rabinovich. He said yes. I was a bit surprised, as from Leah's words, I had understood that no one else would be coming. I spoke sadly about what a harsh life Pesach went through, being a Holocaust survivor, and this new acquaintance agreed, and told me how Pesach had never been a complainer even after all the hardships he suffered. I spoke about Pesach's generosity, what a charitable man he had been, and this strange man agreed and added stories to what I already knew about Pesach. Then I asked him, how did you know him so well? Did you also live in Montreal? And the guy looks at me as though I am a dope, and says, what are you talking about? He was my brother. I cannot explain to you all the thoughts that ran crashing through my mind. Pesach? A brother? I've known him all my life, and my parents have known him. He always said he had no family. How can it be that he had a brother whom I had never heard of? Delicately I asked the man if Pesach had discovered perhaps just lately that he had a brother. The guy looked at me like I was really dopey and said, no. He came very often to visit me. Now I was totally stumped. I checked what time it was in Montreal. 7 hours difference. Too early to call my mother and tell her this incredible news. Pesach has a brother. I just could not believe it. Then I said casually, flight is coming in at 2 from Montreal. The guy says, nope, coming in at 2:30. And it's not from Montreal. It's from Detroit. Detroit? I asked puzzledly, not understanding why Pesach would want to take a tour in a coffin from Montreal to Detroit and then to Israel instead of coming directly. Just didn't make sense. Now listen to the next snippets of conversation. Why would he come from Detroit? Because that's where he lived. No he didn't. Pesach Rabinovich lived in Montreal all his life. No he didn't. Pesach Rabinovich lived in Detroit all his life. I was stumped. I just didn't get it. And then, every thought came to my head. I asked, his wife is Leah, right? And the guy looked at me strangely, and said, no. His wife's name is Doris. And then it hit me. 2 Jewish men, both Holocaust survivors, both by the name of Pesach Rabinovich, both charitable men, had passed away on the same day, and had asked to be buried in Israel, and were being brought to Israel on the same day, with half an hour between them. I got this eerie feeling of the angel of death had been told to take the soul of Pesach Rabinovich, and had picked up all the Pesach Rabinoviches on the way that he could find. As I said, I doubt if anyone is going to believe me or my story. I will add that the deceased from Detroit came out a few minutes before my Pesach, and his coffin was attended by many grieving family members. Afterwards, Leah came out, red-eyed from crying, and all alone, looking so fragile and lonely. All she had in the world was Pesach, and now he was gone. I ran to hug her. One important P.S. I was worried they might mix up the coffins, i.e. put the Pesach Rabinovich from Detroit into the grave bought for the other Pesach, my Pesach, and I went to the 2 hearses and looked through the window. There was a small slip of paper attached to each coffin, with the deceased's name plus his father's name. I knew that Pesach's father was Mordecai. Sure enough, in the hearse reserved for Pesach from Montreal the paper read Pesach ben Mordecai, which translated to English means Pesach the son of Mordecai. Luckily, the other Peach's father had a different name, and so I was reassured that they would not mix up the coffins.
What word single-handedly made someone cry? Saying yes to my fiancé without being sober was a giant mistake. My best friend Sarah, 26F, and her husband Matt, 28M, have put me in a very difficult position with my fiancé Jack, 30M. I knew Matt since my childhood, he was my neighbor and we were friendly. Sarah and I were roommates in college and became close friends. When I introduced Sarah and Matt, they hit it off and started dating each other. I was happy to see 2 of my friends get together but also annoyed that I became the third wheel and was often ignored or set aside because they were so into each other. By the time I graduated, Matt had completely dropped me as a friend. That saddened me, but I was still good friends with Sarah, so it was what it was. Sarah and I would frequently hang out, but I never talked with Matt other than the occasional polite hellos. Sarah would sometimes try to do couples dates with her and Matt and me and my dates. I found that Matt had developed an unpleasant personality and would frequently be rude and condescending towards me. However, he's a very devoted and loving husband to Sarah, so for her sake I ignored him. When my fiancé and I got engaged, we had no plans to do a party. Sarah was disappointed that we didn't throw an engagement party, so she organized a small get-together at her home to celebrate us. The party was nice, and as things were winding down, my fiancé and I went to thank Sarah and Matt for their sweet gesture before we took our leave. Matt was pretty tipsy by then, and out of nowhere he suddenly hugged me and in front of my fiancé said that he was so glad that I was finally settling down and he is relieved that now I'll be over the crush I had on him. I was shocked and told him that wasn't true. He just laughed and told Jack that I was always chasing him and he had to work hard to keep me away. I dragged Sarah in and asked her to please fix this mess, and she was all like, oh, he's drunk, ignore him, and says, you know I always trust you, I know you wouldn't act on your crush. Jack was pretty pissed by this point and he walked out. I ran after him and tried explaining that this isn't true, but he told me he doesn't want to be anyone's second choice or their backup plan. Since that night he isn't talking to me or returning my calls. I have talked to Sarah multiple times to clear things with Jack, but she's brushing me off. I don't understand why they believe this or why she'd stay friends with me if she thought I was into her husband. I was in her wedding party and did all the work because her sister who was the mo was too busy. I have helped her through her pregnancy and have babysat her kids so many times. She never gave me any indication she thought this, and why would she want me close to her family if she believed this? I feel humiliated that these people think I was pining away for a jerk like Matt. I need help in convincing Jack this isn't true. I am also mad at him for throwing away our relationship over what some drunken idiot said. I don't know what I'm going to do about my friendship with Sarah.
Waiters, what happened that made the whole diner silent? Thinking about it still makes my skin crawl from how loud the silence was. I work at a dinner theater, and we usually do proposals where we set up a random draw where the winner comes up on the stage to win their prize, and are then surprised by their partner who proposes. It's usually sweet and makes everybody in the room fuzzy and warm. This one guy wanted to take it further and requested to perform a song. He brought his music and everything. We're pretty easygoing at this job, so we agree to let him do it. We do the fake draw, the woman comes up on stage in front of a room of 400 people, and the music starts to play. This guy was a little nervous, and he compensated by having a few drinks. So what follows is a slurred performance of a song written by this guy, that seemed to focus on how he was sorry for cheating on this woman with her sister, getting into vivid detail of the eventful nights they shared, and at the end of it, he gets down on one knee and decides to propose. Usually, this gets a round of applause, encouraging the person to say yes, but not after that train wreck of a performance. Everyone stopped eating and just stared, making the silence palpable. The poor woman was just holding her face the entire time and started shaking her head and saying, "No, what's wrong with you?" She storms off and leaves him and our stage manager on stage to a bunch of murmuring from the audience. The only thing our stage manager can think of to say on the mic is, "Well, that's all folks." The guy ended up staying for the rest of the show and had many more drinks. He drove home, and I honestly don't know if he made it home safely. I think the sister may care a little more than his ex.
Waiters, what's your Valentine's Day story that you'll never forget? Older woman, probably in her upper 90s with her teenaged grandson at a semi-classy restaurant. She was dressed to the nines and the grandson was in a nice button-up and dress slacks. As they got seated at their table, the grandson placed a framed photo of what my friend assumed was the boy's grandfather and husband of the older women. Found out it would have been their 70th wedding anniversary, but he had passed suddenly but peacefully a few months back. The grandfather had always wanted to take her to a nice restaurant but never had the time or money to do it. So the grandson saved up his pay from the last couple of months and even got some donations from other relatives and took her to the restaurant. They ate dinner remembering all the good times with the man. They had my friend to take a picture and she did. They tipped my friend very well. By happenstance my friend ran into the young man some weeks later to find out the grandmother passed away a few days after that night. Peacefully in her sleep holding a photo of her beloved husband, he was so happy he could make that night special to her. Said it was the only day he saw her smile since his grandfather passed away. He got the picture they took at the restaurant printed and wallet-sized and carried it around with him in his wallet.
I've been hiding a secret from my pregnant daughter. If I tell her, I think she'd unalive herself. So me, 53, and my wife Rose, 53, had our older daughter Sarah, 31F, when we were 22. We were young and broke, but managed, and now we raised Sarah the best we could. She got pregnant at 15. It was a very depressing time for her. She had to go to therapy, and never told us anything about the father, which always upset her, so we never pushed the issue. She originally wanted to terminate, but kept canceling, and eventually told us she wanted to give her up for adoption. But 5 months into the pregnancy, when she was discussing with a social worker for a couple to adopt, the couple dropped out of the adoption. After trying to find more couples, Sarah asked us if we wanted to adopt. Me and Rose were both 38 at this point, and we had both been discussing having another child, so we ended up adopting our daughter Ellie when Sarah had her at 16. 2 years after Ellie, me and my wife had our son Logan, 13, biologically. Growing up we always planned on telling Ellie she was adopted, but we knew with telling her that, we had to tell her Sarah was her biomother. Sarah never became close with Ellie, not even as C-tears. She moved out after the birth and lived with Rose's sister. She has always shown sisterly love to her Logan, but never towards Ellie. There has always been conflicting feelings with Sarah. I have seen posts on Sarah's Instagram where she posted a picture of what was supposed to be the 5 of us, but Ellie was cut out. I confronted her about this and she says it's too painful. However, a couple years ago she showed up drunk begging us to let us see her daughter. We talked to her and let her stay but did not let her near Ellie since she was drunk. We found out from her husband she had suffered several miscarriages and was told to consider a surrogate. She ended up doing that 4 years ago and has since had twins Jack and Jill, 3, who are biologically hers. Ellie has loved being an aunt to the twins, and Sarah has encouraged this with Ellie, and has been inviting Ellie over her house for family time with Logan, who loves being an uncle. We have asked Sarah that in light of the twins, and Ellie being close to them, wouldn't it be time to tell Ellie the truth, but Sarah keeps claiming she is not ready. Recently Ellie came to us and has told us she is pregnant. This time it is a completely different situation. We have met the father, he is a childhood friend of hers, and they decided they wanted to lose their virginities to each other. We had the talk with Ellie long ago, as we did with Sarah. We approached the situation calmly and have since met with the father and his parents. Ellie is insistent on keeping the baby. She is 3 months along. We have not told Sarah yet. We do not know how to approach the situation. We don't know how she will be able to take it. Me and my wife are considering telling Ellie the truth, but we need Sarah to be there. I've been hiding a secret from my pregnant daughter. I found out that my family line is a circle. Plot twist, we're from Alabama. I was wondering about advice on what to do after finding about my daughter Ellie is pregnant, but that we had the exact same situation with her older sister Sarah, who is actually Ellie's biological mother. Well, I decided to just focus on helping out Ellie, who is 4 months pregnant. We didn't want to stress her out by telling her about the adoption yet. In fact, we know we should have already told her a long time ago. Despite Sarah's emotions on the matter, it's not like we even knew the details on Ellie's father, so that would have been Sarah's talk, but we as Ellie's parents still should have told her the truth when she was younger. A week after I made the post, Ellie told family about the pregnancy. She had since told my parents, her boyfriend's grandparents, and then of course, she has told Sarah. Sarah didn't react well, but told her she would support her. Of course Sarah reached out to us after, very upset, but said she was ready to talk to Ellie, first about the adoption with us, and she said that she wanted to tell Ellie about her father alone. We sat down and had the discussion. Ellie was of course upset, but calmed down after a while. She of course had questions about her father. Sarah had that discussion with her. At the time I didn't know what she was told, and it was none of our business, but Ellie told us she knows who he is, and said she didn't want to reach out, so we moved on after that. The other day I got a call from my sister-in-law Renee, 31, my brother's wife. She was angry and was asking what kind of sick ideas was Sarah putting in Ellie's head. She started mentioning stuff about Ellie's adoption, so after I got her to calm down she told me what happened. She claimed that Ellie had messaged my brother Ethan, 32, and told him about the adoption and wanted to talk to him. This confused me because me and Ethan don't talk much. We were never really close because we are 21 years apart. He was my mother's late child and he always got along with mine and our sister's kids as they were all around the same age, and Ellie only saw him on the holidays, so telling him about the details in her life didn't make sense. Renee explained to me that Ellie claimed that Ethan was her father because that is what Sarah had told her and told him that he was going to be a grandpa. I had to sit down for a while. I called Sarah and we had a long conversation. She told me that yes, it was true that Ethan is Ellie's biological father. Sarah and Ethan were close when they were young, they were only 8 months apart. Sarah says that when they went thought puberty feelings changed and that every time she went to her grandmother's they would hide away from everyone and have their own time. Sarah was upset talking about this but told me that he never assaulted her and that it was always consensual. She never wanted to tell me because she was ashamed of the fact that the father of her baby was her uncle. I have since talked to Ethan as well. He denied it to Ellie over text but told me that it was true. We exchanged a few words back and forth. Even if this was consensual, how could he sleep with his own niece? He had all these but I wasn't hearing it. He knew of the pregnancy and being Ellie's father the whole time, and he never even bothered to step up to say anything. I have talked to Ellie about it. She says she was upset when she found out, but she always thought she looked like my stepdad's side of the family. It upset me when she mentioned that because honestly I see it, it's pretty obvious now. I always knew that Ellie favored whoever her father was because she didn't look like anyone on our side, but I never suspected Ethan. My mother and stepdad have found out and Ethan told Renee it was true. She has left with their kids to stay with her family. Ethan has tried to reach out to Ellie now but I don't want her speaking to him. I'm still her father and I don't think she is safe being in touch with him. Ellie has shown no interest in talking. I asked her why she reached out to him before talking to Sarah or us about it, and she said she just wanted to know his side of the story, but feels betrayed for being lied to. My best friend slept with my mom. I was having a chill night at home with my girlfriend, my friend, and my mom. We just finished having supper and we started drinking. At one point my mother, my friend and I were getting fairly tipsy. We started arguing about politics, and since my mom and friend have similar views, they kind of ganged up on me. We were all getting a bit frustrated about that and my girlfriend could tell, so she told me to just go to bed and forget about it. Which left my mother and friend alone upstairs. Now this may seem like a bad idea, but my mother has always been very cool with my friends, so the fact that he would attempt something never occurred to me. In the middle of the night, my girlfriend wakes me up and tells me we have to go. I'm still in my drunken haze sleep and I just agree. As I am starting to come to, I realize some poop is weird. My friend comes downstairs and passes out on the couch. I go upstairs and my mother locked herself in the bathroom. My girlfriend and I decided to go get some McDonald's. When we finally get on the highway, my girlfriend looks at me and starts to cry and tells me that for at least 10 minutes before I woke up she heard banging noises upstairs, similar to noises two people effing would make. I start to get furious, but at this point, I have no idea if it's true or not. For all I know my girlfriend was probably dreaming. I get home and tell the guy to call himself a cab. Mother is still locked in the bathroom. The cab comes and the guy goes home. I end up going to sleep at my girlfriend's house. My mother denied everything, said that the friend tried to initiate something and there was kissing involved blah blah but no intimacy. At that point, I say F it, nothing I can do. Then, out of nowhere, a certain person that works in our regional hospital sends me a message asking me if I knew about my friend that was in the hospital a few weeks ago. That's when I learned that the guy tried to commit suicide after that happened. Now I am pretty effing shocked to hear all this. I decided to contact the guy and finally get the record straight on the situation. He tells me that he did in fact sleep with my mother, that he regrets more than anything else and that he is ever so sorry. I tell the guy that I don't hate him for doing that, after all alcohol was involved. I just told him that I was disappointed he did that to my family. I also confronted my mother about the ordeal. She still denies it to this day. Who wouldn't, right? She is still with my father, who doesn't know what happened. When have you ever regretted rejecting someone who asked you out? When I was a senior in high school I worked at a popular retail store. There was a new junior I had noticed in the hallway. as we'd made eye contact a few times during class changes and he definitely caught my eye. This was odd because I have always preferred older guys. I did find out he was actually older than me and had been held back, but anyways. He was a wrestler and had shaggy hair. I was a total sucker for that shaggy hair look back then. I was a confident teen, but he was on another level. I was shocked he was attracted to me, truthfully. Back at the retail store, he came in by chance one time with his mother. He almost immediately came up and talked to me. We were flirting back and forth for a while as we talked. Like accidental flirting where you keep smiling and there's awkward silences due to the chemistry, if you know what I mean. He asked me for my number and if I wanted to hang out sometime. I remember finding this very bold with his mother there, and I was shocked at his confidence for being a 17-year-old. At the time I had just gotten into a relationship, so despite being very attracted to him, probably more than my boyfriend actually, as I was with a shy skateboarder/hockey guy and I was outgoing, I knew I could not date him. I still gave him my number and told him I had just gotten a boyfriend. He was like, "What a shame, let's be friends though." I thought it was kinda slick and it worked for me. We started hanging out as friends and got close quickly. Like, talk about anything. He made me feel seen and I'll never forget that. Jay actually lived less than 5 minutes from my childhood home. We saw each other a lot. I'd hang at his house and he'd hang at mine. Texted and talked on the phone. All his friends, and please remember we were young. He came to visit me at work one day and I'd gotten close to a coworker, a girl my age. He came in and I think brought me coffee or something like that, don't remember. But she was like, "Who is that?" once he left. She lived a city away. I was like, "Oh, that's one of my close guy friends." She asked to be introduced. Not gonna lie, I was a bit jealous, but I knew I had a boyfriend, so I was like, okay, absolutely. I organized a hangout for us three and they exchanged numbers. I remember it being so awkward because I was definitely not feeling it and couldn't hide my face, but really liked her and wanted it to work for her. Before he asked her out, he did ask me if it was okay. I was like, "Oh yeah, no worries, go for it, she is great." Looking back, he definitely meant it because he liked me and knew we had a connection. I fumbled the bag. Fast forward and they date for a few months. We all hung out and actually I included another friend into this little group. I was still with my boyfriend at that point, but he went to another high school across town and did not have a car, so he never joined us. J and C have intercourse and she takes his virginity. She complains constantly that it doesn't seem like he's into her, won't say he loves her, blows her off unless it's our group hang, etc. Meanwhile he was texting me constantly and acting totally normal. I remember actually approaching him and essentially being like, "Do you like C or what, because she says you're acting like a jerk?" I was kinda upset because he wasn't treating her fairly, but in our group hang he was all over her, so I wasn't really sure what was happening when they were alone. Long story short, he breaks up with her. I remained friends with both. She hated him for a long time. Fast forward again to a few months later. My boyfriend and I broke up. I'm down the street from him at a party, absolutely wasted. I'd gone through a lot that year honestly and was kinda going overboard. He and I are texting and he's basically telling me he thinks we should have been together and he only dated C because blah blah blah. I'm wasted and tell him to come to the party so we can talk face to face. He comes and we are in the front area of the house talking it out. He was looking good and alcohol got the best of me, so I grabbed him by his shirt and we started making out with nobody around. Even intoxicated, it was an incredible kiss. I was rattled. We probably made out for like 10 minutes before I came to and realized what I'd done. I immediately regretted it and apologized. He was like, "No, it is okay, I've always wanted to be with you," and I'm like, "No, I'm gonna have to tell C, I'm a horrible friend." Fast forward again to the next day or days. I feel like crap. On one hand, I really liked this guy and knew we could be great together. On the other hand, I knew my friend dated him. And a friend I hooked him up with at that. So I decided to shut the F down. He was reaching out and trying to ask for a chance. I told him I couldn't do that to my friend and we would have to stay friends. I don't remember all the details, but it was horrible. Guilt got me and ignored my girlfriend for like 2 weeks or something ridiculous. Not really ignored, just avoided hanging in person. She finally asked what happened. I broke down and cried and told her. She said she gave me permission to be with him. I didn't know what to say and I didn't want to rock his world again. I knew I was leaving soon and thought it best to leave it as is. I never told him about that convo. Just said I told her. I went off to college and he messaged me on and off for the first few years, just saying he missed me and our friendship. Updating me on his life, etc. I moved on and let him go. He eventually defriended me. I wish him absolutely nothing but the best, but I have no doubt in my mind that had I given him a chance back then we would have been together a long time and it would have been a great relationship, even if it had not been for forever. Probably would have saved me from a lot of trauma too.
You want to act disabled? I'll help you become a step closer to it. Gave her a reason to sit at the disabled seat. The bus I take going home is usually filled to the brim. At one stop, there was an elderly man with a cane who got on. As the person closest to the doors, I stood up to give the seat to them. Suddenly, a middle-aged woman swooped in the moment I stood up. I was just so shocked at the rudeness. No, she wasn't elderly or disabled since her bus card didn't announce it was discounted, nor was it hard for her to move around since she was perfectly fine standing up the bus for a few stops. Another person thankfully gave up their seat for the old man instead. So now here I am standing beside her. Of course I would step on her feet accidentally. The bus was swaying quite a lot, and because it's quite packed, she can't complain since it can happen. I'm certain she noticed, so by the time there were less people on the bus, I dropped my backpack, which was full of university books and a laptop. In hindsight, that was probably a bad idea, but it was secure and it had no damages. She yelped and annoyingly said, "Excuse me? It's on my feet." Roughly translated in my language. I just sheepishly said sorry and moved it away, also rotating my arms to signal it was heavy and I couldn't carry it anymore. Smile, the last hurrah was picking up my bag and making sure I grazed her shin with my foot before heading out my stop. Edit: I found out she was actually disabled, so this whole thing was kinda silly, huh?
Has your friend ever tried to hurt you? I got an email from my best friend Joshua. In it, he denounced me as a betrayer. He said that I used him. He said trashy things about my other friends. This is only 1 week since the last time we hung out. Then he proceeds to accuse me of telling him to put his dog down, which I had no memory of doing. How did I do this? First, because we went to the subway, this meant I was speaking to him in subtext, whatever that means. I asked him to go grab my wallet in the car because I had forgotten it, and he interpreted this as me telling him to fetch, which meant I was putting him down like a dog, which correlated to me telling him he needed to put his dog down. Josh was going full schizo. After many emails back and forth trying to figure things out or make up with him, I give up and don't hear from him for months. Then at the end of April, there's a knock on the door, and there Josh is, wearing a tool belt with a claw hammer on it, claiming the landlord had hired him to fix some broken trim. I don't think we have broken trim, but at the very least thought this was an attempt to reconcile with me via talking and that this was a ploy to see me. I let him in, and we went upstairs to the kitchen. I go back to ask my roommate if he's aware of any broken trim. He shakes his head and I head back to the kitchen. I get there and I'm immediately hit in the back with a claw hammer twice. Once with the claws, the other with the head. I back up against the counter and Josh is waving the hammer in front of me. I start yelling for my roommate to get out here, and eventually he comes out to see this scene. Josh is demanding that I kneel on the ground for the final blow. He is spouting about how he already called the cops on himself, telling me I'm a child abuser, amongst other ranting. My roommate, bless him, somehow convinced my deranged best friend to drop the hammer. I took that opportunity to run to my roommate's room and try to lock the door, so I could use the other door in his room to get outside and circle around to the landlord's place to get help. Josh barreled through the door I was trying to lock and then started trying to choke me. My roommate dials 911, but has to come back and try to pull Josh off of me. We struggle back up the hallway to the kitchen. We break the walls in the process, and I'm still bleeding everywhere. I get loose for a moment and dash down the steps, out the front door, then over to the landlord's door. I open his door without knocking, and just as I'm stepping inside, Josh is on me, choking me out from behind. I look to the landlord for help, and he goes and grabs his gun, which makes Josh back off of me. My roommate stands between Josh and myself while the landlord goes into my apartment to look at the damage. Josh is telling me that someday I will be trapped in a storage unit, being tossed food like an animal, that I'm a child abuser. He tells the landlord that the landlord is harboring a child molester. He's pacing as he's saying this, exactly like a caged big cat, with the same feeling of menace. Meanwhile, the landlord has seen the damage to his apartment unit and comes tearing back outside, yelling at Joshua, telling him to throw a punch now that he doesn't have his hammer. Josh is basically pushed off of the property from the force of the landlord's anger, but not before he had the audacity to ask for his hammer back, which my roommate laughingly refused, it being evidence and all. Josh tells the landlord where the cops could find him and walks home. The cops find him exactly where he said he'd be. The aftermath is that I have an aching back for a few weeks, but with no permanent damage. Josh is convicted of aggravated assault and goes to jail. I spoke with his dad after the sentencing hearing and found out that his dad had found him sitting in his room talking to himself or giggling at things no one else could hear. He also sat in his front yard for 24 full hours, supposedly waiting for me to come hurt him. When I didn't oblige, he came to get me. I hope he gets the meds he needs, since he's sick and is someone I really cared about. I hope he gets better, but I don't think I could ever trust him again.
Stupid husband wouldn't go on vacation with me, so I left him behind. My husband and I planned a week-long vacation to New Orleans. We, but mostly I, have been planning this for months. Back in March, I told him I would plan most of it, where to go, and what to do. All he had to do was make sure he had the week off and buy the plane tickets. I spent the last few months researching what to do. I booked the hotel room, made reservations at places we wanted to try, and made a list of all the sites I wanted to see. Every few weeks, I would check in with my husband to see if he had asked off and bought the tickets yet. He would say he was waiting for the plane ticket prices to go down. 3 weeks ago, I reminded him again and he said he had gotten off work for the day but had forgotten to get the tickets. He looked online and the tickets were close to $1,500 a ticket. He said he was going to wait some more to see if they would go down. Last week, I asked if he had bought them yet and he said no. We looked again and the prices were still high. He said he wasn't willing to spend that much on them and asked how much money I would lose if I just canceled everything instead. He offered to have a nice vacation just staying at home instead. I told him I was not willing to cancel everything because I spent so much time planning it. We argued and we didn't come to a conclusion. I wound up buying just one ticket for myself and when I flew out Saturday, I told him I was still going and he acted all surprised that I didn't want to stay home with him. I am in New Orleans now and he is blowing up my phone saying that I am an a-hole for still going without him. He was trying to get a ticket to come too, but I told him that if he came, he would get his own hotel room because this is now my vacation away from him. My awful parents ruined New Year by kicking out my husband over a knock-knock joke. I am never speaking to them again. My husband is a jokester and loves to crack jokes all the time. He especially likes to joke with my brother, Ethan, and his wife. Ethan was okay with it until he started complaining about Mike taking it too far with his jokes. Some context about my brother. He and his wife couldn't have kids, so they adopted a 6-year-old boy named Joey 2 years ago. My husband has been making silly, light-hearted jokes that involve Joey's biological parents as a way to mess with Ethan and his wife. I already talked to Mike and I tell you that he's 100% mean no harm and he was just trying to get them to react. So fast forward to New Year's Eve, my parents hosted a big celebratory dinner and my brother came with his family. Everyone was happy and we were all delighted to be together. We then decided to eat dinner, and while we were eating dinner, Mike decided to tell a knock-knock joke to Ethan. He said, "Knock knock." My brother laughed and said, "Who's there?" Mike replied, "Joey's biological parents." Then he bursted out laughing. Silence took over and Ethan's facial expressions changed. His wife called Mike a dumb SS, to which Mike replied with, "Hey, relax, it was just a joke," while still trying to suppress his laughter. My brother's face became red and his wife was trying to calm him down. My parents suddenly told Mike to leave, which I thought was too harsh. I tried to speak to them and get them to calm down, but Mom insisted that Mike leave. We left and Mike was complaining the whole time about how they overreacted. When we came home, I called my mom and she told me Mike was out of line with his hurtful jokes about this touchy topic. She also told me I was wrong for defending him and saying he was just joking. She said he ruined the New Year for the family, but I told her it was she and Dad who ruined NY's celebration by escalating the situation and kicking him out. I told her he could talk to my brother, but again they were the ones who ruined the NY celebration. My mother called me delusional for this statement and hung up. We haven't talked to them for days and I tried contacting Ethan but no response. My childhood best friend is in an abusive relationship. Calm as a beach. My childhood best friend was my biggest bully growing up. She ditched me for years and wouldn't respond to my texts or calls. Out of nowhere she asked if she and her mom could come over to talk. She asked me to be maid of honor at her wedding, which was in a week. She cried in my kitchen when she asked, saying how she had no other friends to ask. I went through all of the duties that come with being her maid of honor and agreed. She treated me poorly the entire time and let her cousin speak to me like scum on her shoe. Every degrading thing this cousin would say to me caused my childhood friend to burst out in laughter. Furthermore, my childhood friend berated me because I refused to drink at the bachelorette party, completely disregarding my struggle with substance abuse. I convinced myself to be kind to get through the wedding and then never talk to her again. I did just that. A few years go by and I get married. She randomly reached out and asked why she wasn't invited to my wedding. I told her because of the bid numbers had to be small. A few more years passed, and again out of nowhere she texted me because she wanted to meet up. I agreed out of curiosity. I walk into her home and instantly feel the tension between her and her husband. Throughout our conversation he would chime in unnecessarily to degrade my childhood friend. As soon as he got out of earshot her eyes filled with tears as she started telling me how unhappy she is and how abusive he is to her. I didn't validate a thing she was saying and told her, "Oh, it's completely normal for couples to argue sometimes." I thought she was finally getting what she deserves. Calm as a beach, Gwen.
I have to choose between my wife and my sister and it sucks. My sister, 30 female, has issues with opioid addiction for the last 11 to 12 years. When I, 33 male, was dating my wife, 31 female, and when we were first married my wife supported me when I was trying to help me sister. She was fine with my sister staying with us, or helping to pay for rehab or legal representation. She came with me when to visit my sister in rehab or on prison. Now my wife says she's done. She says if I bring my sister to live here or pay for anything she's leaving. I received a call that my sister overdosed again and was given naloxone and brought to the hospital. My sister has been evicted from the place she was living and needs a place to stay once she is released from the hospital. Normally I would bring my sister to my house to stay here until she can find somewhere else. My wife says no more. She told me she's tired of bailing out my sister or having to lock up certain things so my sister won't steal them. She's complained about our finances. She wants to try for a baby but she's afraid I'll put my sister before the baby. I see what she is saying. I know my sister needs a lot and does cause issues. But she's my sister, she's family, I'm all she is since our parents no longer help. I'm her older brother and I feel like it's my job to protect her. My wife says she's done and I have to choose and it sucks. I'm still figuring it out and trying to convince my wife but I just needed to get it out. Steal $100 from me? I'll steal $80,000 from you. In the 3rd grade I was an awkward kid. I had an abusive father, and I struggled to fit in and make friends. Derek was one of my classmates. He regularly took part in bullying me, but one day he seemed to change, and he was being nice to me. After being deprived of kindness or attention so regularly, I fell for it. He hung out with me during recess when I was usually alone. We laughed and talked about girls we like. He even apologized for being a jerk to me. Turns out the only reason he was nice to me was because I had brought a very popular, expensive Batman action figure to school with me to pass the time. I saved my allowance and mowed lawns for 2 months to buy that toy. Everyone wanted one. By the end of the day he asked me if he could lend the action figure. Like the naive, socially inept kid I was, I trusted him with it. The deal was to return it the following morning. I went home happy, and completely fooled. I didn't suspect a thing. The following day he completely ignored me. When I tried to talk to him he acted like I was crazy. When I asked him to return the action figure he simply said, "You never gave me that toy, maybe you imagined it," and when I persisted he threatened to beat me up. When I complained to my teacher I was told that it was my own fault for bringing toys to school. I was afraid they would involve my father, so I dropped it. If my father knew, it would only make my life at home worse. The next day, I thought my life was over. Derek had told all the girls that I had a crush on them, and said that I wanted to do weird things to them. I was a social outcast before that, but at least I was tolerated. After his smear campaign with the girls, I was a monster. Nobody would look me in the eyes, not even the teachers. Kids started throwing stones at me, vandalized my property, and I couldn't do anything about it. I was just a weak-willed kid after all. I had nobody to run to. After a while the bullying died down, and I focused on my studies. I actually started getting good grades. Derek tried talking to me again, but I ignored him completely. Sometimes he would repeat, "Why are you being such a baby? You didn't give me anything, you imagined it." I couldn't care less about what he had to say. By the end of the year we moved houses and I transferred to another school not far away. Things were much better there, I finally had friends, so I was not as easily targeted. Over the years, I became somewhat of a delinquent, and in high school I got into regular fights. I may have been overcompensating for my younger years. I bartended in nightclubs, hotels, and cruise liners in my early 20s. This helped me a lot to be more socially adept and to understand social dynamics and human nature. I finished trade school and qualified as an electrician and later as a plumber. I started my own business, developed a reputation for excellent workmanship in my local area and did well for myself. When I was 29, I received a call out at 2 a.m. for a flooding emergency at a local residence. When I got there the place was a mess, water was jetting out of a burst pipe and electrical equipment was shorted. It was highly dangerous. The living room floor was caved in due to a sinkhole. I was met by the wife, Jane. She was hysterical and beside herself. Somehow, she believed she was responsible, which I found odd. I assured her that it couldn't possibly be her fault. He arrived not 5 minutes later. His demeanor was irate. He didn't greet or shake my hand when I offered, but I recognized him immediately. It was Derek. He demanded to know why I have not begun fixing the issue yet. I told him what I'd told the wife in terms of costs, but I hid the written quote in my vehicle. I told him who I was and acted happy to see him, and assured him that he was in good hands. After a while of arguing with his wife he seemed to calm down and joked around with me. I knew I had fooled him. We talked about our careers, kids, school days, and I gave him tips and fake recommendations. We got along great. His trust was easy to gain. He must have thought of me as a complete sucker. I assured him that he was in good hands and this would be fixed in no time. So we hastily try to wrap some presents, but no one really gets anything done, as by this point no one can even stand up anymore. Now me and my brother are seasoned stoners, but even we can't move more than 2 steps before falling to the floor and needing 15 minutes rest to get up again. We decide that the only thing we can do is to try and sleep it off, and hopefully we feel better in the morning. So after a while of all 7 of us struggling up the stairs, we finally make it into our beds and try to sleep it off. We all wake up on Christmas Day still whacked out of our minds and not able to function properly. We then realize that we have to go and pick up my brother's friend who is joining us for Christmas, but none of us are in any state to drive. So, after explaining to my grandmother that none of us can drive to pick up the friend as we are all too zooted to move, we had to call an Uber to bring the friend to us. This cost a small fortune as it was Christmas and he was about 25 miles away. When my grandmother and 7-year-old brother arrived, my dad managed to put on his Santa costume so that he could hand out the presents. As we are all sitting, waiting for Santa to come out and hand out the gifts, my little brother is waiting in anticipation. My dad, still zooted out of his mind, walks out with his Santa beard down, eating burnt cookies and drinking milk. He tries saying, "Ho ho ho," but just chokes on his food. My little brother sits there in absolute shock and asks me why dad is dressed up as Santa and why his eyes are bloodshot. My dad just starts giggling uncontrollably, and tells my 7-year-old brother, "Santa ain't real, buddy, it's time we told you." My little brother starts crying and runs to one of the rooms. Eventually my grandmother counsels him and he comes back still noticeably upset. We soldier on through Christmas after handing out the horribly wrapped gifts, all of us trying to just not be zooted anymore. We finally made it to the end of the day still off it. We go to sleep and wake up the next day and guess what, we're still zooted as hell. I genuinely thought it would never end, but eventually later that day we all started coming back down to planet Earth. So yeah, I ruined Christmas by getting my whole family too zooted to function properly. Evil mother-in-law purposely skipped my 5-year-old's insulin injection. My baby boy was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, making him insulin dependent. Our lives haven't been the same ever since. We've been struggling with accepting his condition as the new normal while trying to learn as much as we can and be able to provide our son with the best care and minimize the occurrence of hypoglycemic events, and to prevent long-term complications. He needs to check his blood sugar 3 times a day before giving him his injections. We do this based on pediatrician instructions. My husband and I are on a limited income. My husband has PTSD and stress-related health issue. He no longer go out with friends, he cannot focus on his job, and he has become distressed and would get angry very easily. I forced him to get treatment for his PTSD if he wants to be strong for his son. He has only recently started taking medication and we're hoping he'll get better with them. When my mother-in-law found out about our son's condition, she wanted to be in the center of it. She started directly getting involved in everything. Wanted to be there for doctor's appointments just out of concern. Made backhanded comments about how poorly I'm handling my son's condition. She even said that this happened because my husband and I stopped going to church on Sunday, and that it will get better if we start attending again. Last week, my husband and I were attending group therapy, then my husband asked if we could both go someplace quiet and eat dinner. It was rare that he asked, so I said yes of course. And we dropped our son off at my mother-in-law's house. She should know how to take care of him since she's attended all the sessions. I've given her new syringes and the insulin bottle, alcohol wipes with finger pricks, and everything she needs. My mother-in-law has experience and has been trained to give insulin shots and learned how to do it properly. However, we haven't visited in a while, and she made a comment about how skinny my son is because of this diet that we're following. I told her we're just following the doctor's instructions. She said that apparently the doctor isn't doing a good job. She complained when I told her that he needs to get his blood sugar checked, give him insulin injection before each meal, and no treats or cakes. She agreed to everything, and it was just a few hours, so I figured everything will be fine. At around 6 p.m. we came to her house to pick him up. He looked sleepier than usual, she said, probably because he was playing with the dog all day. I asked if she did as she was instructed because it was very important, and she said yes. We said goodbye and left. We got home, all my son wanted to do was sleep. He fell asleep on the couch as I was preparing dinner for him. My husband tried to wake him up, but he looked like he was dizzy, nauseous and sweaty. My husband was concerned. He told me something was wrong. I ran out the kitchen. My heart was pounding. I asked my son if he had his insulin shots and what he ate at his grandma's house. He was clearly not focused at all when he answered, and he said no, he didn't take his insulin shots. I quickly pricked his fingertip, and his blood sugar was 300 mg/dl, normal should be 70 to 100. I freaked out. I told my husband we needed to go to the hospital. We rushed him to the hospital, and the doctor told us it was hyperglycemia. They started treating him in the emergency room, administered insulin, and inserted 4 fluids to rehydrate him. And kept monitoring and checking his blood sugar every 15 minutes. I was so terrified and angry at the same time. My husband called his mom. He was in a good mood all day, but he started yelling at her and telling her that our son has been taken to the emergency because of her ignorance. She lied to us about giving him his insulin. The insulin bottle hasn't been touched, but she got rid of the syringes to make it look like she did give him his injections. My husband argued with her for 10 minutes. She admitted that not only she didn't give him insulin, she thought he was too thin, so she gave him carbs and dessert. He had a whole piece of cake. My husband finished by saying he was taking her name off the emergency contact list because he did not trust her anymore. My son is fine now, but he is also still terrified of this experience. He's only 5 after all. We're going no contact with mother-in-law. She doesn't deserve to see him or have any contact. My father-in-law had a meltdown because I proved he doesn't know his son. So me, 34 male, and my husband, 30 male, do our damnedest to not spend an abundance of time with my father-in-law. He's a cowardly narcissist who says hot dog unironically. Ever since I came into the picture almost 7 years ago, we have simply not meshed. A great deal of that is due to the fact that I've spent those years instilling confidence and boundary setting in my husband. Father-in-law does not like being told no. We literally got kicked out of a restaurant one time because he couldn't accept that they wouldn't give him a discount. So needless to say, our interactions are nothing more than the exchanging of fake pleasantries. So last week we're over there for our quarterly visit. The way these evenings typically go is that my husband occupies my father-in-law while my mother-in-law tests out her new English vocabulary on me. This time, my husband is doing the bulk of the talking to both of them because he's excited about the new organization he's working with. Father-in-law keeps trying to change the subject because it's been 2 seconds since the subject of the conversation was about him. My husband and my mother-in-law both snap. I'm not entirely sure what they said as my Spanish is still terrible, but it amounted to them telling father-in-law to shut the heck and listen. Father-in-law gets obstinate and essentially tells my husband that no matter what the organization is, it'll never compare to the work he did in his youth. Father-in-law literally just hiked through Central America with a white savior complex until things got violent and he came back home. My husband understandably storms out with my mother-in-law hot on his tail. Awkwardness ensues because I'm chuckling at my father-in-law. You know, he never spoke to me like that until you came along. I know. I'm so proud. You've changed him. No. This is who he's always been. You just never noticed it before. I know my son. What's his favorite color? What? What's his favorite color? It's the same one he had as a kid. Father-in-law is left speechless. Name 2 of his interests. They don't make any sense. Name 'em. He is left speechless yet again. Here's an easy one. What's the name of the organization he's working with? Again, he doesn't speak. This wannabe Bob Ross, granola-eating mofo couldn't answer. My husband said the name of the organization like 5 times that night. You want to know the sad part? My parents can answer each and every one of those questions, and they've known your son a fraction of the time you have. Cue the screeching in Spanish. Being yelled at in a foreign language by a non-native speaker is a surreal experience. Obviously my husband comes in and yells back and it blows up even more. But the part that stands out is the fact that father-in-law still refused to admit that he just hadn't taken a genuine interest in my husband in years. Like bruh, you don't even know your kid's favorite color. Hello? Now my husband is contemplating going no contact and I can't blame him.
I found out my estranged sister is having a baby and I'm devastated. My 30 female sister, 27 female, has been estranged from the family since she turned 18. I don't blame her, our family is extremely toxic. Shortly after she turned 18, she announced she was leaving to go study abroad. We were all supportive and happy that she was going to experience something most don't get to do. However, she just never came back. She deactivated her socials, got a new number, etc. I was absolutely heartbroken. I don't blame her for running, but I just wish she kept in contact with me. She was my best friend. Losing her was like a part of me died. 2 years ago I signed up for TikTok just for fun. Everybody was talking about it and I wanted to see what the fuss was about. I'd watch it every night before bed. One night I was scrolling and my sister's account popped up on my For You page. I didn't really recognize her at first since obviously she was older, but I just remember thinking, wow, she looks familiar, until it finally clicked. I locked myself in the bathroom and binged all of her videos. Some of the things I learned. She's married and has been since she was 20. She still resides in the country she said she was gonna go study in. She owns her own hair salon. I watched all of the videos. She posts a lot about her day-to-day life, her career, her husband. No mention of her past life. She has a decent following and gets a decent amount of likes. I've been stalking her socials for 2 years now. I know it's pathetic, but I finally feel like I got closure and like I finally have my sister back, even though I'm not talking to her. I didn't tell any of my family about this, not even my husband. I don't want them going at her. She looks happy and content. I don't want to disrupt that. She posted video a few days ago announcing her pregnancy to her followers. Her and her husband look so happy. She looks so happy. I want to reach out, but I know I'm in the past. I don't want to disturb her new life. I'm just heartbroken thinking about what could have been. She'll never meet her niece and nephew. Her child will never meet my kids. I'll never be able to hug her again and tell her how proud of her I am. I've been trying to distract myself with my kids, but it's just been tormenting me. I'm devastated I will never see her again, only through a phone screen.
Am I the a-hole for starving my daughter? My daughter is a brat. She's turning 8 next week and still cannot hoover when she is asked. I mean, seriously. I have worked on a farm since I was 6 years old and she can't even figure out how to turn on a hoover. I yelled at her to stop being so ridiculous and to start thinking for once, and instead of doing it properly she started crying. I've been getting better at managing my anger, so thankfully it didn't become physical, but my God, she was asking for it. I told her if she didn't stop crying she would not be getting dinner that night, but she wouldn't stop crying. I told her that's it. You're not getting dinner tonight, and if you'd like to eat anything tomorrow you'll hoover this entire house right now. She continued to play dumb as if there wasn't a power button right in the middle of the damn hoover. So I brought her to her room and locked it. She didn't stop crying for the entire night, and even wrote me a letter saying to Daddy, I am sorry, I want to eat dinner and do all my chores. Love, Daisy. I find it adorable how this little rat thinks she can just apologize her way out of the consequences of her actions. I had to show her that unfortunately the world doesn't work that way. She cried the entire next day saying that her tummy was hurting, and I told her she could think about that the next time she decides to be lazy. I decided one more day should do the trick, and after what felt like another week of her screaming and crying, Sunday had ended, it was time for her to go back to school. I gave her breakfast on Monday morning and she was very grateful, and I was even more grateful I didn't have to listen to her bull crap anymore. Well, apparently the little crap decides she's going to tell her teacher she went the whole weekend without food, probably for some sympathy or attention, as she loves to get attention wherever she can. The teacher called me to come in and sat me down and asked me if this was true. I told her it was true, but I had very good reason. The teacher told me this is abuse and she's going to have to get authorities involved. I didn't think what I did was bad enough to warrant interference. This little worm thinks she can cry for attention wherever she goes, and when I try to teach her a valuable lesson, she goes and gets me into trouble. I'm now deciding how I'm going to punish her. I want to tell my son that I want to be part of his life again, even if he is gay. I feel that I should preface by saying I'm not the typical type to ask the internet for advice on such a personal issue or any issue at all. But the unfortunate thing I've come to realize is that I can't discuss this with anyone I know. I'm in my late 60s and my son is in his late 40s. His mother and I divorced when he was young, and for all intents and purposes, I essentially raised him as a single father from a certain point onward. I did my best to raise him well and to be sure he had everything he needed, but I worked a lot of hours and was very career focused. I realize now I was somewhat absent. I'm also fairly emotionally reserved in general, at least when it comes to physically speaking. I'm better at writing. When he was in high school and in college he had several girlfriends, and one girl I thought he was very serious about for the majority of his time during his undergraduate education. They broke up. After that he never brought home any more girls or talked about any, and he moved away to attend medical school and we stopped talking as much as we had previously. I remember very distinctly one time while he was visiting on a break from school I was worried about him and I had asked if he was taking substances. He just looked physically ill and in a poor state. He assured me it was stress from school and he would be fine. But I remember this clearly because this visit home was when I first started to think he could be gay. Now the thing is, my son has never told me that he is gay even to this day, but it has become an unspoken acknowledgement between us. He has a roommate, that's how we mutually refer to him, and he's had the same friend for a long time. Sometimes I will ask about him but the answers are always short, basically that he's doing well. I think I know maybe 5 things about his friend after some almost 20 years, maybe longer. We speak on the phone occasionally as we live far away and this is something we never discuss much, if at all. Recently I've been doing a lot of thinking. I think I'm a poor father. Somewhere down the line I taught my son that we can't speak about who he is. I'll admit I'm not the most versed in this kind of lifestyle thing, but I don't want to be shut out from his life. I want to tell him that whatever this is, he's perfectly fine in my book and I love him. I want to know him and his friend, but I don't know how to tell him or what to say. I'm not sure if I should say boyfriend as again, he's never said anything to me about being gay. I've just pieced it together over time, so I'm not sure if that's what I should say. Should I just spontaneously bring this up with him? There never seems to be a good time to say what I'm thinking, and the topic seems too serious to send an email or very long text message. I'm not sure if a written mode of communication would be too informal or make it seem that I don't care. At that, I'm not sure where we should go from there. Update 1. I'm thankful for all of the kind advice I received in regard to my first message here. After reading all of your words, I decided I would handwrite my son a letter and send it in the mail as we live across the country. In summary, I wrote about many things and the letter ended up being much longer than anticipated. I began by discussing some of my experiences with my father growing up in ways I realized I had treated my son similarly. I had wanted to do better than my father, who had moments where he could be cruel, but I failed to realize that being too reserved was also a problem and I leaned too far in that direction. After his mother left, I was depressed and I didn't deal with that as well as I should have. I apologized for being absent at work and for being emotionally unavailable at times when he would have needed me the most. I mentioned I'd like to change that in the future, but it's still something that's hard for me to do and I understand he may need his own space. Then I wrote about how even though I probably don't show it well, I do love him with my entire being. There's nothing he could do or be that can change that, and I'm proud of him for many things. I wrote that by extension I love whoever he loves, and his chosen family is family to me as well. All said and done, the letter was several pages long. Then I mailed it, and it was incredibly hard to wait. I decided to text him to let him know I had sent him a letter as we don't typically write, and it seemed like something that warranted some warning in advance of its arrival, so he wouldn't be entirely caught off guard by it. Eventually he sent me a text that he would like to call me at the end of the day. We spoke about everything in the letter. I learned that he had believed I viewed him as a burden, which was disheartening to me as I had always wanted to be a father since I was young, and I never saw him as being a burden, which I told him. We discussed his mother and the plethora of feelings surrounding her. This was a hard topic for me as I still have many unresolved feelings here, but I realized because of this I never explained to him everything that happened. I also learned that he was afraid to disappoint me, and that he had put a lot of effort into his career to make me proud of him as he felt this was the way to impress me and that it would make up for his defects. I brought up that focusing on work over family and interpersonal relationships was one of my bigger regrets, and he admitted that being so career-driven was straining his personal life. With everything going on at the moment, he also expressed that the medical profession was weighing on him, but he hadn't wanted to disappoint me by not being as emotionally strong as he thought I am. By this point in the conversation we had both said a lot of very emotional things. He brought up that he felt it was hard to talk to me because I don't make it clear what I'm thinking, and so he felt it was always easier to only discuss work or accomplishments with me and nothing personal. He felt it was easier to let his relationship be an unspoken understanding between us as he felt I would be uncomfortable to know anything more. At this point I confirmed that his friend is in fact his partner. He said he felt a lot of shame about it. I told him I regretted not reaching out to him sooner, that I'm sorry that my lack of availability had created this distance between us, and that I'm always proud of him and not just for his career. We ended the conversation by discussing seeing each other in person, as it has been almost 10 years since we've actually seen each other. I expressed that I would like to fly out to visit him and his partner if he would feel comfortable. I now have a plane ticket for early next month, a date which is quickly approaching. I am glad for all of the encouragement I received from this website. I have nothing but gratitude for all of your kind words. Once again I am asking for a little advice. I have never met his partner in person, nor have I ever spoken to him. He has been with my son for 2 decades at this point and likely knows him better than I do. I would like to make a good impression with him. However, I don't know any gay couples, aside from them, and as was thankfully pointed out in my previous post here, I am not aware of all the proper ways to describe things as I incorrectly use the term lifestyle. I would like to be invited into their lives, so I wish to avoid offending either of them. Are there any suggestions of common things I should avoid saying to them? Perhaps I'm just nervous because this is coming up soon and I haven't seen my son in so long. Typing some of this out was helpful in and of itself. Update 2. Hello wonderful individuals of the internet. Almost half a year ago I posted here about reconnecting with my estranged gay son, and I received the encouragement I needed to push me to do what I knew was the correct thing in my heart. I went to visit them and I am incredibly overjoyed to say that everything went very well. While there, I had several emotionally tough conversations with my son, but I tried to listen from a place of wanting to understand and accepting that I have not always been the best father. While at times I felt incredibly hurt by what he had to say, it was mostly because I felt defensive and upset with myself that I had caused him to feel this way. I wasn't always sure how to respond, but it seemed that verbalizing that I felt this way and that I would need time to give him a proper and reasoned response to some of his comments, rather than a defensive one, was the right thing to do. I would then reflect on my own and give him the response he deserved from me. While there, I also had a discussion with his partner, and I am glad that this man has been in my son's life. He is a truly good man, and he did say that he was cautious of me because of the past, but that he hoped we could all move forward from it. I also learned on this trip that they are foster parents and have also adopted 2 beautiful children. I did not meet them on this first trip. My son was worried that having kept this information from me would cause me to become upset, and I was sad to have put myself in a situation where I wasn't involved. But ultimately I can only feel tremendously happy. Soon after that trip I flew out to visit them again after we had all recovered from the first trip. And soon after that I flew out a 3rd time. I am relieved to say that after those first trips it is almost as though there was never any time we were apart, and we have been talking every day. I have felt so much joy over being accepted back by my son, and for being accepted by his partner, and I am now working on selling my home and moving across the country to be nearer to them and my young grandchildren. This is a move they have welcomed and even suggested to me first. I had planned to write about my first trip, but it was quite an exhausting time for me. While it was absolutely necessary, it was also draining. After a time I forgot. But I have realized that had I never posted anything here, had I just kept up the way things were, I would never have had my son or his partner in my life as I do now, and I would never have known the children they have welcomed into their home. I only hope that moving forward I can live out my retirement watching my new, wonderful grandchildren grow into the bright people they will become. Nothing gives me more joy, and in part I have this place to thank for it. So thank you. My sister's husband kissed me and touched my body. My sister and I have always been close, inseparable. Well, we grew up and she got married, then things changed. Her husband would always give me weird compliments and say inappropriate comments regarding my body. I mentioned it to her on multiple occasions and she said I was over-exaggerating it all and that's just how he is. I decided I would just keep my distance for a while because I was so uncomfortable and it was that bad, but she wasn't taking me seriously no matter what I said. Well, a few months later my sister's gender reveal came along, so of course I wouldn't miss that. As soon as I got there and he laid eyes on me, he got so excited he bounced right out of his seat next to my sister to run to me for a hug with arms wide. I immediately stepped aside and declined. The whole family saw the situation and my sister glared at me and didn't say 2 words to me the first 30 minutes I was there. She got over that and we had a great time. Towards the end of the shower most people were leaving, but I stayed behind to help my pregnant sister clean up a bit. She then sent me upstairs to get her fluffy slides as her feet were hurting. Little did I know at the time that was the moment that would forever change our relationship. I went to get the shoes and her husband was in the bedroom. As I entered he made his usual distasteful comments that I ignored. Well, I guess he didn't like that anymore, so as I was just about to walk out the door he rushed to the door and closed it, forcing his hands all over my body and kissing me. It all happened so fast. I was so disgusted and shocked but managed to punch him and get out the door and ran to get my sister. I explained everything to her thinking she would be on my side as I had been telling her about him for months, almost a year. Boy was I wrong. As I'm telling her what happened he come downstairs screaming and came up to her saying I wanted him to touch me, and when he didn't want to I got mad. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, but my sister did. She started yelling at me saying I was a puss, that I'll never have her man, and more. By this time the remaining guests had gathered around. The betrayal I felt at the moment was unbelievable. I just blurted out and told my sister to fuck herself and that she's a horrible person for allowing him to do this to me. I even said she's a bad mom if she allows her child to be around him as he's an assaulter. I left and haven't since spoken to her, but she's all on Facebook posting like I'm the bad person, saying I caused her stress. So basically, am I the a-hole for telling her what she needed to hear?
Guys, what is the most obvious hint from a girl you've missed? Sitting backstage at a high school show I was crewing for, I was talking to one of the dancers and for some reason we started talking about clicking popping fingers, necks etc. She told me she could click all sorts of joints, hips, lower back, and so on, and said here. Feel. She spent a good 5 minutes literally putting my hands all over her body. And I only realized what had happened several years later. In my defense, she really could click all sorts of strange joints. I don't miss this anymore, but for years I missed the casual flirtatious touch. An unnecessary yet intentional caress on the arm, shoulder, back, etc. can be very telling. I'm sure someone will be here to tell me I'm wrong and they just touch their friends all the time. But it's always been my experience that if a girl is finding an excuse to put her hands on you, there's a pretty good chance she's at least a little interested. Shortly after high school ended, this really hot girl told me that she had a crush on me for the entirety of my senior year. My response was basically, oh that's nice. Her parents were out of town and we had her entire house to ourselves for the rest of the evening. Could have done it right then and there. You win some, you lose some, I guess. Sigh.
What was your high school's biggest scandal? After the expansion of the parking lot, the high school hiked the cost of parking spaces, then cut the amount of spaces available to students. It was literally the opposite of what they said they would do. Expand the lot to add more student capacity, then drop the per space price. The price hike wasn't small either. It went from, if I remember correctly, $30 to $45 a semester, to well over $100. The student body was so angry that the student government went from decorating the halls to actually pushing back on the administration like a legitimate political body. They filed formal grievances which were completely ignored, then made objections in official meetings with the administration which were dismissed. Then they stopped cooperating with the administration until their grievances were addressed, meaning that when the school told them to do the work for pep rallies and dances, they got told to get lost. The administration then revoked the staff involvement with the student government and told them that the club was now over. They basically shut down the student government, defunded it, refused to support it, and ignored the student government's constitution. Then, the student government decided that it was still a viable political entity, government in exile almost, and organized a mass protest during school hours, which was actually pretty tame. During the break between classes, everyone would go to the gym and show their support for addressing the parking lot issue. The class before this protest was to take place, the principal announced on the PA system and said that the gymnasium was closed, and if anyone was either in the gymnasium or not in their class for the next class they would be arrested. I went down to the gym to check it out. There were hundreds of students who still wanted to go and quietly crowded around the gym's doors, but the doors were barricaded by administrators with crossed arms, and the school resource officer and a backup officer, both in full battle rattle with pepper spray, cuffs, gun, and everything else you'd see a cop with on patrol. We later found out that administrators had pulled members of the student government out of class during this time, and several of them were threatened with immediate expulsion. The student government and body blinked. Everyone went to class on time and the issue basically basically died. At next month's pep rally, we were informed that a new student government had been appointed and we were introduced to them. The head of the government said something about fighting the parking fees, but the message that the student body had gotten from the administration was clear: step out of line, and we'll push you into the school to prison pipeline. The purpose of the student government was to show how the democratic process works. What we got was a display of actual tyranny. An unpopular decision that affected the student body and caused the student government to respond was met with open refusals, threats, the elimination of a legitimately elected government to be replaced by a puppet government sponsored by moneyed interests. What's the most incredible coincidence that ever happened to you? One morning the weekend before Halloween, my 13-year-old daughter came up to me and said, "Mom, today I'm going to meet the man I will marry." How could you possibly know that? I asked this daughter, who had never been boy crazy like her girlfriends nor ever had a boyfriend or date. Because I've been asking and asking God who I would end up marrying, and this morning when I was praying, He told me I would meet my future husband today. She answered matter-of-factly. Needless to say, fear struck my heart. My impressionable daughter believed this crazy idea would make for an interesting, if not scary, day. Today, I would definitely keep her close to me and keep a strict eye on her. That night I knew we had plans to take my daughter and her friends to a haunted house. I asked her if she thought she was going to marry one of her friends. She said no, I'm sure it will be someone totally new that I've never met before. Yikes, fear again. Nothing eventful happened all day. But that evening the line waiting to go into the haunted house went down the street and around the block. The kids didn't seem to mind the long wait and goofed around in line and talked to others nearby. I kept a very close eye on my extremely attractive daughter. Come on, I am her mom, but others think she is attractive too. I suspiciously eyed every boy who talked to her. Finally, our group of teens got to enter. I was behind the group and directly behind my daughter. Dark, scary, fun, and long was the walk in the pitch black, winding corridors. Suddenly a man dressed as the Grim Reaper jumped out right in front of my daughter and scared her so badly she screamed and fell backwards, on top of me and those behind me, toppling all of us over. The, now kind and sorry, Grim Reaper helped us all up, and, noting her extreme reaction of fear, he came out of character long enough to offer to sneak us out a side exit. She said no, it's okay, and we moved on, embarrassed. That night my daughter was so disappointed when she said I was so sure God told me I would meet him today. Fast forward 10 years. My daughter was the maid of honor for her best friend's wedding and gave a beautiful toast and prayer at the wedding. One of the men attending the groom was from out of state and took an interest in my daughter, emailing and calling her after the wedding. Eventually they engaged and married. After they were married, we were sitting around talking and the subject of haunted houses came up. My sister-in-law said he had once helped construct one in an old grocery store building when he spent a year in our town. Really? Yes, he said, and I got to be the Grim Reaper for it and carry a fake scythe. Comparing notes, they figured out that the exact year he had spent in our city was the year my daughter was 13. When asked if he remembered an incident at the haunted house with a frightened girl, he wasn't sure, as all young girls scream. But when he heard she toppled me and others over and he came out of character to offer assistance out a side exit, then he said, "That was you." But that was just a little girl I offered help. Usually I pride myself in never coming out of character, but she was so scared and I worried people might have fallen and gotten hurt. Lol, yes, a 13-year-old, 5-foot-tall girl is just a little girl to a 19-year-old, 6-foot-2-inch young man, as it should be, so my daughter did, indeed, meet her future husband that day. Amazing. Out of the mouth of babes. They also ended up having 5 children. My overprotectiveness saved my kid. 22 years ago my younger sister, 13 female, passed away because of an asthma attack. We were not aware she was suffering from asthma and so we left her home alone because my mom, 40 female, had to work and I, 19 male at the time, also had a part-time job. My mom used to call and check up on her just to ensure everything was alright, but she would not pick up a lot of times because she was busy doing something. It was the same that day. My mom called her multiple times but she didn't pick up, so she just assumed she was out with her friends or something. She called more times and when she didn't answer, mom got worried and went to check up on her only to find her unconscious on the floor. That day scarred me for life. So when, around a year ago I had to leave my daughter, 14 female, alone in the house, I decided to buy an extra phone, the number of which I only gave to my daughter and wife. I told my daughter that she should only call on this number if it was an emergency. My wife thought it was a little overboard and that she could just call on my usual number, but I insisted on it and she didn't resist much. I always keep my emergency phone on full volume and in my pocket at all times, no matter what. And around a week ago I got a call on it from my daughter, who was having an asthma attack. We were able to rush her to the hospital and thankfully she made it out perfectly fine. I cannot explain how relieved I was that I kept this emergency number. I don't even want to imagine what would have happened if I didn't. We have now hired a babysitter for her just to keep watch. I'm sick and tired of trying to date. I'm a 23-year-old man, just out of college, and I have been trying to date and find a girlfriend ever since I graduated high school. I've tried apps and even talked to women in person. For the most part, dating for me just feels like I am stuck in a cycle of meeting someone, talking and getting to know them, and just being led on, flaked on, ghosted, or all of the above. Even women who show interest will end up flaking on me or ghosting me out of nowhere, like giving a sign that they were going to do it at all and it just happens. I've had girls lead me on and spend so much time on them just for them to tell me they're not looking for a relationship. It's gotten to the point I feel like every time I'm with someone, no matter how optimistic it seems, I'm eventually going to get led on, flaked on, and ghosted. I no longer get excited for dates. It's been replaced with dread that that person is just going to blow me off. I feel like I'm putting in most of the effort all the time with these girls. I always have to initiate, make the plans and pretty much do everything. It would be nice if one of these girls would take some initiative. Nowadays I really can't think of anywhere to meet women in real life. I can't really approach anyone in public, otherwise I'm a creep. So I feel like the only real option nowadays is online dating, and don't even get me started on how much of a S it shows online dating. I'm done spending hours swiping, getting barely any matches and no replies because I'm not exceptionally attractive. No one really gives a S about you or who you are on old unless you're extremely attractive, so the deck is completely stacked against me, so FK all that. Who I am does not translate over to a Tinder profile. I am not giving up, but damn does it feel hopeless and just a losing battle. Sometimes I just feel like the universe is telling me that I'm just not meant to be with anyone and that I'm doomed to be alone no matter how hard I try, which feels really unfair, but I'm done playing a losing game. I put in way more than I got out of it. So I am done actively looking and trying to date people. What else am I gonna do? I'm taking a passive approach where if I see someone I really want to be with or actually is interested in me and isn't gonna play games, then I'll go for it, but until then I'm sticking to myself. Can anyone else relate? My girlfriend cheated on me for the dumbest reason. I can't believe it. Let me start off. In high school there was this girl that had a crush on me and eventually asked me out. She couldn't believe it after I agreed because she always mentioned that I am out of her league. I would always tell her that it's not important and that I love her, or else why would I agree on a date, right? The date went great and we stayed together until she was 22 female and I was 23 male. We both have decent paying jobs and we are living in a house and we were planning to get married, etc. The thing I didn't like was that she still always mentioned that I was out of her league. I told her I wasn't comfortable with that and I asked her why she would always mention it. She said that she was scared I would cheat on her. I will describe my life. No female friends, just 5 best friends since my childhood. I don't go partying, and if I would go I would never go without my girlfriend. I usually go 2 to 3 times a week without her with my buddies, mostly to the gym. She does go partying without me, but I don't really mind because I have trust in her and I am not this kind of jealous partner. She would always come back at around 3 a.m. but I would usually be sleeping because I have work at 5 a.m. I am pretty active in Instagram and I would always post pics of me with my buddies or my girlfriend or just pictures of me on the holidays. I would have many people in my DMs but I would always ignore them, tell them I have a girlfriend or just block them. Now one day I was at the gym with my friends and one of them invited me to his house because we were very tired. He asked me to stay for the night and I agreed. I immediately told my GF and sent her my location. She just read it and everything went on normal. So the other day she came home later than usual, around 4:30 a.m. I was awake because I had to go work. After I saw her I just asked why she came so late and she answered with, "I have just forgotten the time." I didn't think much about it and went to work. Later that day I got a message from her saying that we have to talk. I just said that I have to work and I am coming home later. Later that day I came home and she was sitting on the couch crying. I thought someone died and I went to comfort her. I asked her what's wrong and she told me that the day she came late, she had hooked up with her ex. I just looked at her and then asked, why? She said that she is insecure because I'm out of her league and that she is pretty sure that I have cheated too at least once. I just continued looking at her and I said that I needed a moment and I ran out of the house. I didn't know what to do so I just went outside and drove away. I am not an emotional person so I didn't really cry, but I was just thinking the whole time, she effing cheated on me. After I came back home I saw her just acting like everything is normal and she tried to give me a kiss but I refused. I don't know what to do right now. I told her that I am staying at my friend's for a few days. What should I do?
My boyfriend attacked me because of a dream. Supposedly, I was begging for it. In my sleep? I've been with my boyfriend, Mark, for over 2 years. We've had our ups and downs like any couple, but I've always considered our relationship strong. However, last night, something happened that I can't wrap my head around. For the last couple of weeks, Mark has been acting odd. Recently, we've been going out on dates as a group with some of his friends. One of his friends, Liam, is a little too flirty. Every time we go to a group hangout with, Liam makes sure to make as many schlong jokes as possible. Mark didn't seem to be angry when Liam would joke around, but every time when we got home from our hangouts, he would go quiet and ignore me for hours. I've noticed that for the last few nights, he's been acting weird at night. He'd wake up at odd hours of the night to ask me what I was doing. Every time, I'd tell him to let me sleep and that I was just sleeping. He'd roll his eyes at me and turn his back to me. I thought I was going crazy and I asked him what was wrong yesterday. He told me that I was being delusional and that he was fine, he just got startled in his sleep. Being the idiot I am, I let it go. Until tonight. When we were going to bed, he had a dark look in his eye. I thought it was just him being tired from a long day at work, but he was shaky and staring at me like I was a piece of meat. I was kind of scared, but since I've never known him to be the violent type, I just settled myself into bed and went to sleep. The next thing I saw was him inside of me while I was slowly waking up. I yelled at him to get off me, but he just continued with a sick grin on his face. When he finished, I begged him to tell me why he did it. All he said was that I was moaning in my sleep, so I must have been asking for some pee-pee. I asked him why he couldn't just wake me up, and get this, he said he wanted to show me a lesson because he knew I was picturing Liam inside of me. I never thought of Liam that way in my life. I don't know what to say to him, I've just been avoiding him since.
It's the honey thing you've ever done. Drove an hour in to see a girl I had previously made out with because she said she needed a fuck buddy for the night. Got to her place around 9, hung out with her and her roommate for a little bit, then went to the bedroom. She totally shut down my attempts to initiate anything physical and said it was just the alcohol talking earlier and that she was not DTF at all. So we just cuddled for a bit and fell asleep. At 3 a.m. she wakes up and runs out of the room. I'm like okay WTF and then go back to sleep. Next thing I know she turns on the lights and tells me to get out. Had a very long drive in total confusion back to my place. Got home at 4:30 a.m., virginity still 100% intact.
The last thing you Googled is what kills you. So, how do you die? I had never seen so many charts, graphs, and equations in my life. But hey, I thought, maybe this class company poop is actually working. Maybe I'm finally about to turn things around and become a effing scholar. Yeah, right. Fast forward a few weeks, and the stress levels were off the goddamn charts. I was a mess, man, waking up in cold sweats, anxiety through the roof, and don't even get me started on the nightmares. I had become a effing zombie, a shell of my former slacker self. The true horror came on the day of the final exam. With all those hours dedicated to class company, I expected a miracle. Like, the heavens would open up, a choir would sing, and I'd attain knowledge levels equivalent to God freaking tier. But no. The exam was a relentless beast, devouring the hopes and dreams of every sucker who dared to trust in class company. It was like trying to swim through a vat of tar with weights tied to my ankles. The questions were twisted, ambiguous, and completely unrelated to what I had studied. Losers. After that soul-crushing disaster, I stumbled out of the exam room, defeated and broken. I let out a primal scream of anguish which, surprisingly, turned heads. But hey, I didn't give a rat's butt at that point. All my efforts were futile, and the folks behind class company became my new personal enemies. But here's where the jaw-dropping poop goes down. As I left the campus, drowning my sorrows in cheap whiskey, I stumbled upon a group of other poor souls who had fallen victim to class company's sly deception. Turns out, they had formed a secret society of sorts, a collective of students who had been wronged by the same company. It was like a beacon of hope, a sign that I wasn't alone in this struggle. We shared our stories, our pain, and our anger. We talked about how class company had taken advantage of us and how we were determined to get justice. We started to plan our revenge, and soon enough, our little society was ready to take on the company that had wronged us. We launched a full-scale attack on class company, and the results were beyond our wildest dreams. We exposed their lies, their deceit, and their shady practices. We put an end to their reign of terror, and finally, we got the justice we deserved. It was a bittersweet victory. We had lost so much in the process, but in the end, we had won the battle. We had triumphed over the company that had tried to unalive us. And as I walked away from the scene of our victory, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and accomplishment. I had gone from being a helpless victim to a powerful hero. I had gone from death to life. My friend tried to set me up with his coworker's daughter, but I got with her mom instead. My friend, 30 male, recently informed me, 28 male, that one of his coworkers, an older woman, asked him if he knew anyone who would be interested in what she called her chronically single daughter, 25. The woman apparently regarded my friend as a decent young man and figured he would most likely be friends with other decent young men. The reason the woman didn't ask my friend if he might be interested in her daughter was because my friend was in a relationship. My friend informed the woman that he might know a guy. Cue the part where I came in. My friend called me and asked if I would be keen to get to know his coworker's daughter. My first response was to request photos to get an idea of what the daughter looked like. My friend didn't have photos of the daughter, but he did have a name and surname for me to search online. I liked what I saw when I scanned through the daughter's social media. She was really attractive and seemed like fun. I made my friend aware that I was interested. My friend asked for my permission to share a few photos of me with his coworker, also known as the mom, so she could share it with her daughter. I said sure. A few days later, my friend contacted me to share the feedback he received from his coworker. Based on my friend's feedback, the daughter was still in the dark about my existence because the mom suddenly decided that she first wanted to meet me in order to gauge if I would be good enough for her daughter. And just like that, I lost interest. I was in no mood to meet the mom to get vetted and thus stopped caring about the whole matchmaker thing. There were easier ways to meet girls without a middleman or a middle mom. I was on the verge of tapping out, but my friend, who was still fully invested for some reason, managed to change my mind and convince me to go through with it after reminding me of how long it's been since my last relationship. My meeting with the mom happened a couple of days ago. I could see where the daughter got her looks from. From the moment the mom opened her mouth and bombarded me with loaded questions about my life, I sensed something between us. I thought it was my imagination until my meeting with the mom continued in my bedroom. For the record, the mom established she was single prior to my penis entering the picture. I had no post-nut clarity regret when we were done effing, but the same could not be said about the mom. She cut our cuddling sessions short and proceeded to get dressed as fast as possible. I asked her why she was leaving so soon after we had what I thought was good intimacy. She said her daughter was off limits from that moment onwards and asked if I understood what off limits meant. I said yes and asked the mom if she was off limits too or just her daughter. She looked at me like I was a kid asking his parent for a puppy before telling me that we were not compatible and therefore better off going our separate ways. I asked the mom if not compatible was a reference to the age gap between us. She laughed like she expected me to bring up the age difference. When I asked her to fill me in on what was so funny, she said she could literally list all the things that made us incompatible based on the answers I gave her when she was getting to know me and the experience she had getting to F me. Not gonna lie, she was beginning to get under my skin at that point, so I challenged her to share at least 5 things that supposedly made us incompatible. She accepted the challenge and shared more than 5 things. This is what I remember from her list: I habitually bite my fingernails. I avoid the gym. I still look forward to Christmas presents from my parents. I'm oddly obsessed with koalas. I hate sushi. I never learned how to swim. I smoke weed. I'm friends with my ex. I travel to work using a skateboard. I struggle to parallel park when I'm not using my skateboard. I'm too quiet during intimacy. I seem to think playing Rammstein during intimacy is the same as not being quiet. I was unable to make her bust more than 5 times in under an hour. I asked the mom what made her sleep with me if she had so many reasons not to. She said I kind of reminded her of the first boy she hooked up with in high school. I said, and? She said it was old feelings she had to get out of her system. I asked her if I was nothing more than a nostalgia F. She advised me not to put a label on what happened and to forget about her and her daughter forever. This post is proof that I'm struggling to forget. Not only did this woman leave me feeling used and a little insecure, she's also avoiding my friend at work, and now he's low-key blaming me for contributing to an uncomfortable working environment. F my life. My brother and his girlfriend spent all of his inheritance and demanded that I hand over half of mine to him or they would sue me, so I blew up both their lives. When my brother was 16, and I was 4, my grandmother set aside a portfolio for us to share. As soon as we were old enough, it was transferred into our accounts, and it was only 4 years later that my brother dipped heavily into his and bought a new Honda. I knew about mine for much longer than he did before it became mine and watched it grow since I understood what it was. By the time I was given complete control, it was already worth a ridiculous amount because a significant portion of it was invested in Apple, and I'm torn on using the funds locked up as they are because Dad drilled it into me to leave it to grow until I'm 40. I don't talk much with my brother. He's done some stupid things to the family over the years, and I didn't grow up with him, so all I usually hear about his life comes from Dad. His new girlfriend works in law, though, and I've received a formal letter from them saying that my grandmother's investments were designed for us to use, not just for me alone, and he was only around $15,000. The number is correct, but mine was only worth that when he spent it. They want half of the value now, and his girlfriend has informed me that if I don't give them access, the legal fees and fines would eat up my half, and I'd be left with nothing. The dividends alone support a considerable part of my life, and they've saved me a few times. If half of that disappeared, it'd set me back years. I know it sounds selfish, but I'm used to having the extra income to back me up when I want to move. I've lived in 4 states by my own choice, and want to move and take in more before I settle down if I ever do. So, I worked with my dad and got my lawyer. What my brother and I inherited from my grandmother was originally part of my grandfather's portfolio. He was the money-savvy one. My grandmother looked after those after he died, and she set up my brother's accounts and gave him control of his part. She didn't do the same with mine before she died. Instead, the shares were in her will, and she left everything she owned to my dad with the instruction that what was $15,000 worth when my brother got his equivalent part would go to me when I was old enough to know how to take care of them. There was no trust. She just trusted my dad. My dad did the right thing, set up accounts for me, and gave me control 6 years ago. My dad also added some of his shares, as an extra leg up. Dad admitted to me he'd chewed out my brother last year when he came to him asking for money, and Dad had supported him several times over the years and got to the point where he'd had enough. My brother found out I still had my investments because Dad had used me as an example of how my brother should have been using money. That's how my brother discovered I still had shares, and they'd grown. According to all that info, my lawyer tells me I'm in the clear, but it won't get to the point of finding that out in court as my brother's girlfriend was only a legal secretary. I say it because the firm she worked for apologized and informed my lawyer she was terminated immediately. The letter I received from them had been edited to put her name in a higher position than it should have been, and some of the contact information had been changed. My brother visited me a week after she was fired, begging for money. His girlfriend is in serious debt, and she took a chance to scam cash from me and lost. I felt awful rejecting my brother repeatedly, and if he hadn't involved his girlfriend, I might have given him some. Have you ever caught your child doing something that shocked you? My 2 kids are seemingly at each other's throats about 106% of the time, so when we first announced that we were going to make an offer on a new home, it was no surprise that they immediately started arguing over who got the bigger room. When we went back to look at the house a second time, they suddenly turned into professional salesmen, each espousing the redeeming qualities of the room they did not want, trying to convince the other that the smaller room was, in fact, the better room, and they were willing, through an act of complete selflessness, to allow the other sibling the express honor of acquiring that specific high-quality piece of real estate right now for the low price of some square footage and a little less closet space. 2 days ago, we finally closed on the house. The room dispute, however, had not been resolved. It was that day that my children left me utterly shocked. My teenage daughter, honestly not known for her consideration or giving nature, announced that she would voluntarily take the smaller bedroom. She admitted that she had in fact had the larger bedroom at our previous home, and even though she is older, it was only fair that she relinquish her claim on the larger abode. My son, while initially jubilant with his apparent victory, was soon hit with a pang of guilt. His sister obviously wasn't happy. She immediately began picking my brain about ways to expand her new space. Was there any way to make the closet bigger? Could we buy her a wardrobe? Could we add some built-in shelves? My son broke into the conversation. He wanted to trade rooms. He said he didn't need the bigger closet as much as she did, and he didn't mind that the other room was a little smaller. She protested. He insisted. Most of all, he said, he didn't like the creepy shed door outside the window. My daughter reluctantly accepted. My son isn't afraid of a shed door. He just loves his sister. I will leave my adoptive family overnight. All I leave them there will be a letter. I, male 18, was adopted by a family when I was 5. I don't know my biological parents. The family already had 3 children. 3 girls. Apparently after the first girl they tried for a boy, but it always ended up being a girl, so after 3 girls they adopted me to finally have a son. In the first few years of my life they treated us all well. My sisters, however, were never able to accept me. They saw me as an outsider who doesn't belong in the family. Actually, it was the oldest one, called Alicia, who poisoned the other 2, called Maria and Juliet, against me by telling them that our parents would treat me better because I was a boy, which wasn't true. In fact, all 3 of them protested against me getting a room in the same floor as them. And my parents gave in. There was a spare room in the basement where I had to sleep now. This, however, just led to them making fun of me, calling me names like cellar rat and many more things. I just shrugged it off, assuming that's how siblings treated each other. But I realized that having my sleeping room in the basement somehow also affected the way my parents treated me. Sleeping down there felt like I was out of sight for them. They lost interest in me and I became less significant and important. While on the other hand they started to focus more on my sisters. When I was 13 they completely lost interest in me. It was like I was a homeless person living in the basement. They missed all the appointments I had. They didn't care about my grades. They never even called me to eat. Sometimes I would come upstairs and see how they already took away the plates. If I was lucky there were leftovers that I could eat. Do you think I got presents for my birthday? No, because they didn't even know my birthday in the first place. And last Christmas they said they forgot to buy presents for me, saying they will go shopping with me the next few weeks to get me something, which, as you might expect, never happened. I don't feel despised towards my sisters. I'm glad they have a home where they are cared for and that they can feel loved. I just don't understand why they would adopt me if they just throw me away like a piece of paper. I think they just wanted to have this feeling to have a son for some time, but then realized they could never love me like one of their own. And putting me into the basement was the last straw. That is when they completely banished me from their minds. And I just can't do this anymore. I decided to pack my things and leave. I will do it tonight. I stay at a friend's house for a while and try to look for a job that hopefully gets me enough money so that I can rent an apartment. And after that I will never look back. I decided to leave a letter behind in my room. I wouldn't be surprised if they never even find it. Let alone notice that I'm gone. I use a throwaway for this, but I actually don't know why. I thought I don't want them to see this, but now that I think about it I could send them this post. I don't know why I even write this in here in the first place. I feel so desperate. Maybe I want this because I hope that someone is interested in me and my story.
My drag mother said I was dried up in all my areas, so I took her special cream and started matching other people's freaks. When I was a baby drag queen, I worked at a beach bar named Rico's and I thought I was hot poop. The reality was I was a mess until one big-backed queen took me under her wing and helped me fly. When I first started working my tats were fresh, I had a cute little eyebrow piercing and I was young and doing what I loved while living by the beach. It had been my dream to perform, so even though I went on at 7 and performed in the direct sunlight for 3 years, honey, I could never walk away from my dream. But as much as I love drag, baby, it's heavy, it's a lot. When I step out there not only do I have a pound of face and body makeup on, but I got pads, tights, and my pee-pee taped up between my cheeks. My body is already going through it under all that, and I can't have cheap sunscreen staining my costumes. So the longer I performed under the sun at Rico's, the more wrinkled and red I became, and it didn't take long until I couldn't ignore all the damage I'd done to myself. All the hours I had spent spinning around in direct UV had given me fresh wrinkles, faded tattoos, and hands drier than a Popeye's biscuit. The day I realized I couldn't read my mom's name tattooed on my arm anymore, I broke down and started covering up. Overnight I went from my signature revealing bikinis and stallion fits to long-sleeve jumpsuits that reached the floor. I didn't feel like myself, and the tippers could immediately tell. I wasn't as flexible in all that fabric, so I had to pull my moves back, and the beach crowd didn't seem to vibe with a stiff beach only showing her ankles. The crowd kept dwindling, but I couldn't lose any more of my precious tattoos, even if my downgraded look was costing me more tips every night. I was sure it was all over the day I had to perform to no one. Literally no one watched my set. It was slow and the only people at the bar never even turned around to look at me. I still turned it out with tears in my eyes, but my dreams of being a success in drag were melting away in my hands, and I started to wonder if I had done irreversible damage to my skin for nothing. As if that week couldn't have gotten worse, Rico hired Venus Aphrodite the very next day. I hated her from the moment I laid eyes on her, all of her. I had no idea that she was the only queen who knew the industry secret that could save me when I needed it most. She was 7 feet tall, wig to the ceiling, and now she was the only other tatted queen on Rico's stage. She might as well have walked in dragging my coffin behind her. Getting new competition like her when I was at my lowest meant the end of my career, and I started to accept that my time in the spotlight was truly over. I was burnt up and washed out. I looked older than my age, and my outdated outfits and ashy skin didn't help. Meanwhile, Venus was turning the house down every night she stepped out on that damn stage. I had been busting my butt at Rico's for 3 years and got nothing in return but the possibility of skin cancer. Then this girl comes in, has regulars within a month and a wall of tips waiting for her every night. On top of that, apparently she had all the money in the world for touch-ups for her tats, because I never caught them losing any boldness like mine did. She danced under the same hot sun, yet she never got burnt like all the other new girls. I couldn't make out a single wrinkle on her, yet she never had sunscreen stains on her costumes. The girl had her full arms out every day under that sun and would leave with nothing but an even tan. Even after months of her performing out under the same sun that had fried my tats to scribbles, Venus remained remained flawless, and it was unaliving me. I didn't understand how she was older than me, tattooed, but her skin looked better than mine. I wanted what she had more than anything. I stayed up at night trying to guess what the secret was to her beauty. How did that old beach manage to preserve her tattoos without a speck of white filmy sunscreen? I had to be a decade and a half younger than her, but she had mastered performing in the sun. Meanwhile, it had turned my skin into beef jerky. I never thought I would have confidence like Venus. I watched her in the dressing room but never caught her using anything that looked like sunscreen. I couldn't let my jealousy go. Everyone loved her so much, it made me sick. She was the new tatted queen. It was like everyone had completely forgotten that I also had 2 full sleeves. But I couldn't even be mad. I'm the one who had hidden my washed out tattoos. Eventually, I started making wild plans about going through her makeup kit to finally discover the mystery product that preserved Venus like she was in resin. Finally, I decided to go through with it one day. I peeled my grandma jumpsuit off as slowly as possible, and told myself I would make a move as soon as the dressing room was clear. The last queen stepped out when I was halfway out of my costume, and I started making a beeline for Venus's station when I heard a booming "Oh girl" from right behind me. To my shock, I watched Venus stomp directly over to me. I was sure I was about to get red for either my crispy skin or what she had caught me doing. But she gagged me when instead she said she had no idea I was also a tatted queen. She was thrilled and then told me she hadn't seen a body as snatched as mine since she had DJ'd for that lil twink Bad Bunny. She asked me why I didn't show more body or display my tats, and I ended up telling her about all my sun damage and why I hated cheap sunscreen. I told her how I had tried to buy clear sunscreen in my early Rico days, but back then I was treating Grindr like Airbnb. I was not affording no $200 clear sunscreen. What Venus ended up revealing to me that night could have saved me months of skin damage and lost tips. Venus said she went through the same thing when she was a baby queen, and it had taken her years to find a solution that worked year-round. She then shot up and grabbed a tube of something called OrganoShield sunscreen from her station just for me. I felt awful for hating her, and I loved her for deciding not to gatekeep to a stranger. She said she loved this one since not only was it clear but it brought out the details in her tats, and absorbed quick enough that she could put it on right before she got on stage and get the most out of the long SPF. Suddenly everything clicked into place, and I realized it was clear gel sunscreen, so it would be 100% clear against both of our full sleeves instead of the white cast every other sunscreen me and the girls used. It must have been the secret to her success that I had made myself sick over, and here she was, putting it right into my hands and altering the course of my career forever. Venus became my first and only drag mother after that night. She took me shopping for new sexy outfits and reminded me every day to use the clear gel sunscreen before I performed. She pointed out that as the only 2 tatted queens at Ricos, we were a spectacle and people can never look away from a spectacle. She loved saying, "The crowd loves a freaky Latina beach." Venus told me she was gonna help me get mine at Ricos, and Miss Girl was not lying. She had me like Cadet Kelly up in that dressing room. Every night she made sure all my tats were completely covered in our trusted clear gel sunscreen, and taught me new numbers. About a month after I became Venus's drag daughter, my skin had completely healed up from the wreck it had been for years, and I was finally able to regain my golden tan with the help of Venus's little secret. Every morning before I got into drag for work, I spread out on the beach knowing my tats were protected, and Venus even surprised with an appointment to get my mom's name touched up. Venus had been 100% right. Just a little coat of my OrganoShield sunscreen right before I went on had made me the people's freaky Latina princess, and they loved me. I got all my tats redone with my new tip money now that I could finally preserve them in the sun. Plus showing more skin on stage eventually got me back in the gym, and soon enough I was looking like a perfect little hash brown again. I felt like a new woman, honey. The body, the ink, the tan were all looking right, and I had never looked or felt more sickening than I did since I started using that clear gel sunscreen. My tats were back and looking snatched and bolder every night now that I finally had a way to take care of them. I ditched all my old jumpsuits for sexy lil outfits again, and suddenly I was back to my high energy flexible self, and the crowd was growing and eating it up every night. Within a month I went from a beach who walked around in a circle looking like one of the Golden Girls to Rico's headlining beach bronze body queen. And mama, you know you've made it in drag when even straight guys can't take their eyes off you. Slutty outfits, bold tattoos to match my drag mother, wide splits, and my golden tan came together to create my signature brand, and it had all started with Venus's tube of OrganoShield sunscreen. She constantly reminded me to take care of my largest organ, my skin, since it was the garden of my beauty. When Venus and I performed together, we played off each other's strengths and included acrobatics in our dances. Since I was smaller than Venus, she could pick me up, spin and flip me in the air, and the crowd ate it up every time. Whenever we did numbers where we mirrored each other down to the double cartwheels, we would leave a line at the stand-alone ATM and you could barely hear the music over the crowd losing their minds. Venus never wore little bikinis like me, and I usually ended up hogging most of the OrganoShield once I became known as a body queen. Since she was older, our looks always complemented but never outshined each other. Even though the ground shook when Venus walked into the room, she came into my life and gave me stability for the first time. When Rico decided to host a pageant at the end of the summer, of course she convinced me to compete in the bikini contest. The day of the pageant, Venus said that tonight everyone would see what she had always seen in me. She was the only person I looked at as the host placed that crown on my head. So remember, baby queens, bitter queens get broke, befriended queens get better.
My parents are telling me to not come home for Thanksgiving break because I went to a debate tournament. I'm in college right now and I, 20 female, live away as I dorm. I'm also in my college's debate team, and this weekend we had a debate tournament at a school a couple hours away from us. I actually live in the same city as where the debate tournament was taking place. I was planning on going straight home after the debate tournament for Thanksgiving break. I told my family I would be home this weekend and that I had the debate tournament as well. They were fine with it. Since the tournament was a 2-day thing, I initially asked my parents if they were comfortable having me and my team members stay over at my house. They said we don't have the space, so I should look for accommodation elsewhere, and by that, they meant a hotel. My debate team then looked for hotels, but we were going to be there in a Friday night in a big city, so we decided to stay at another team member's house who also lived in our same city. Anyways, the day comes, yesterday, and we attend the competition, and it goes on until 11 at night. I call my parents and tell them I'm going to my team member's house. My dad loses his mind because he thinks we should be in a hotel and that my university doesn't care about us since they didn't put us up in a 5-star hotel and drive us out there with a big car. I tell him that's not how it works. As a club we only get a certain budget and we chose to not spend it on a hotel so we could have money left over for other future expenses. He was also upset I'm staying at a stranger's house, even though it's my teammate I've known for years and her parents were there with us. My dad was upset and told me to find my own way home. He was initially going to pick me up. My dad didn't end up picking up my calls later into the night. Early this morning, when we arrived at the tournament for our second day here, I called my parents to let them know I'm safe. My dad angrily told me to quit the debate team and this would be my final tournament. I told him no, I won't be doing that and that I didn't do anything wrong last night anyways. In the end he told me to just go back to my college, and to not bother coming home for Thanksgiving. I'm still at the tournament right now and we leave in a few hours. How do I better communicate with my parents on this issue, and should I just spend Thanksgiving break at school?
Demand proof of illness? Hope you have. I bleach. I had a boss one time who was such a control freak that she demanded to know specifically why I was calling out sick. I told her I had food poisoning, and she kept pressing me to explain what my symptoms were and why I couldn't make it, and all via text. I finally had enough and was like, look, I'm not physically capable of working today, and it's illegal to ask me personal questions about illness and medical history. She threatened me with a write-up if I couldn't prove why I couldn't make it to work. Being that I was basically living in the bathroom for days, and had aggressive diarrhea every 20 minutes and the worst abdominal pain I've ever experienced. I took a very disturbing picture of me painting the bowl brown right before I flushed and sent it to her. It looked like I power washed the inside of the toilet with feces and built a turd island in the middle of the water. It honestly looked like a poop volcano had erupted. I had no idea your bowels could contain so much. This is happening every 15 to 30 minutes, and I haven't been able to leave the bathroom for the last 6 hours. Here is your proof, check the timestamp. I'll let you know as soon as I can if I'll be in tomorrow. So after 3 days off, I showed up for my shift, sleep deprived and sore from sleeping in my bathtub or on the floor for 3 days, asshole not having any of it, but I was finally through the worst. She immediately escorts me into her office, where our regional HR rep is waiting for me, and we all sit down. He has paperwork in front of him and is discussing the incident with me and gets me to acknowledge what I did and that sending unprovoked and offensive content to coworkers constitutes harassment, and right before he asks me to sign a final write-up saying I'll be fired before I do something like that again. Before signing, I asked him, did she tell you why I sent it? He was dumbfounded and said this isn't really excusable and basically handed me a screenshot printout of the text messages where this bitch deleted everything besides me saying sorry, but I need to take a sick day today, and the picture. I laughed and handed him my phone and showed full exchange. He asked me to leave and give them a few minutes. About 10 minutes later, he calls me in, by myself, and explained that she was the harasser and that she had aggressively violated privacy laws and would be dealt with, and to call him if anything like this ever happens again. She ended up getting a final written notice and was super close to being fired, and it prevented her from getting a big promotion that she was being looked at for. And I guess old habits came back after a while. She did something similar again with one of the pregnant coworkers and got fired. My liquid guzzling mom ruined my life. She decided to take 2 schlongs at once and got us kicked out. I am 16 years old with 2 younger sisters. Our biological father was a deadbeat. He left my mom when she was pregnant with me, came back 6 years later, and said he wanted to make amends and that we could be a happy family. Somehow, my mom immediately started saying that she loved him, but he left after mom got pregnant again. Then 2 years later he came back. I cried and begged my mom to not let him into our lives because I hated him. Well, he said the same thing. My mom also said she loved him, and then he left after she got pregnant again. He used her as a breeding machine, and she just let him like a dumb SS. My mom was a waitress, so the 4 of us lived in a small 1-bedroom apartment. My mom made me take care of my sisters. They even started calling me dad. I had to correct them right away before I got incest accusations. Sometimes, we wouldn't eat breakfast or dinner because we couldn't afford it. Other times, I didn't eat anything so my sisters could eat. My mom met another man, 45, a year after my youngest sister was born. He was a good man for my mom, Savannah. His wife and daughter had died in an accident a long time ago when he was in his 20s. He met my mom when he was ready to date again. It was like some cheesy rom-com. He was our savior. He is a really good man and treated us like his own children, and I consider him my father. He was very wealthy and owned multiple businesses. We eventually moved into his huge mansion-like house. I also had a better school there. We 3 siblings got our own rooms, and I got better clothes, played video games for the first time in my life, and a bunch of other things. He taught me things that helped me catch up in school because I could not do well in my previous school. He spent a lot of time with the 3 of us. My sisters eventually started calling him dad. I followed shortly after. I remember him crying, hugging us, and telling us he loved us when we called him dad for the first time. They eventually got married, and dad asked me to be one of his groomsmen. Of course, I said yes while my sister was my mom's bridesmaid. Mom stayed at home to take care of us. As far as I know, they were very happy together. They went on dates at least once in 2 weeks, kissed each other frequently, and always told each other that they loved each other. He also knew about mom's past and realized she had issues and got her into counseling. I was really happy that my mom had finally found someone who treated her well. I was also very happy for myself and my siblings and really loved him. He also said that he would pay for college for the 3 of us. My dream is to become a doctor, and I never thought it would be possible cause it was so expensive and I was so freaking happy. Mom also told me she was very lucky to have found him and that she loves him and is very grateful for how he has made her and our lives better. Well, last year, in July, Dad discovered that my mom was having an affair with his best friend, who was also the best man at their wedding. Apparently, the affair was going on for a long time, I do not know exactly how long. Mom cried and begged him to give her another chance. He didn't, understandably. He let us keep all the new things, such as clothes for me and toys for my sisters. When I went to him crying and asking him why he was leaving us, he just hugged me and told me about Mom's affair. He said the affair was too painful and that he could not be in this marriage anymore, and then said that he loved me and my sisters. My sisters do not know about the affair, I do not think they will understand. He got a prenup, so Mom did not get anything that wasn't hers. Dad just had to pay the rent of a new apartment until the divorce was finalized. We stayed in a decent apartment, but after the divorce was done, we moved into a much smaller apartment. I tried to be in contact with him, but it does not seem like he wants a relationship with me. He has never responded to my messages. I sent a final letter to him last year in December, thanking him for everything he did for me and my sisters and that I loved him and would remember him forever. So now we're back to a 1-bedroom apartment, skipping meals and barely being able to afford anything. I sleep on the floor now. My sisters share a bed while my mom uses another. Mom is a waitress again. I've also taken a part-time at a grocery store to help with money. I just hate my mom so much right now. I only took the job to help my sisters. I have also stopped talking to Mom. Recently she came crying to me and told me that she was sorry for ruining everything, and she wanted me to talk to her. I broke down and just said, I don't understand. Why did you cheat on him? He was taking such good care of you and the 3 of us. He was also going to send us to college. For the first time in my life, I was happy. You have destroyed my life. Why do you always have to ruin everything? You already did that twice when you let Biofather back in my life. I hate you. I never want to talk to you again. You're just A for the streets WH. She was crying a lot after I said that. I am gonna admit what I said was pretty rude, but at that time, I was just so angry. I just hate her so much right now. I just wish she died a very painful death. These thoughts are the only things in my head. It's making me go insane, and I know it's not normal. I read online that therapy would be useful, but we can't even afford food on most days, so we don't have insurance. All I can think about is how she ruined everything. He didn't even ask for much. Mom was living such a luxurious life and was just at home taking care of her own biological children. I just miss him so much. Even my sisters keep asking when they are going back home or when they'll see Dad again. They've also started crying and asking for Dad a lot of times this past year. I just don't know what to do anymore. I am so frustrated and just angry at everything. I wish I could run from here, but if I did, who would take care of my siblings? That stupid mother can't do crap. What is the most legendary senior prank you pulled? Throwaway account because if anyone got word that I did this, me and my friends would be in the shit. A little background. At my boarding school we have this huge farm program with a bunch of animals that a few classes and faculty members take care of. We also have this really bitchy headmaster who would always lose her temper at students, make really strict dress code rules, and even the teachers would mention how she's a pain in the ass. Essentially, she's not the type to take a senior prank well. So anyways, me and my boys thought of the ingenious plan to, before she wakes up, lead a bunch of pigs onto her front lawn with carrots and buy a bunch of fake poops, to make it seem like they all shitted on her perfect bright green lawn. So got all the necessary supplies and set the plan into action. We all woke up at 5 a.m. and headed to the farm. We let like 25 pigs out and had baby carrots to lure them and make them stay right on her lawn. We also had 2 huge trash bags filled with the fake poops and scattered them all over her lawn and some on her front steps. And let me tell you, these fake poops are the real deal, they're actually squishy and super realistic. We got this all done half an hour before she left her house and camped out in bushes nearby to see her reaction. As she stepped onto her front porch and saw our masterpiece, her jaw dropped, and we could tell she was pissed. Her eyes were popping out as she started to go down her front steps and then she slipped on one of the poops, fell backwards and banged her head on a side railing and went out cold. We were all panicking and unsure what to do when her neckbeard of a husband came out and saw what happened. This dude looked so confused at first, then saw his wife lying on the ground unconscious. He ended up calling EMS and she was taken away. We were freaked and decided to swear not to say shit about it because we didn't tell anyone else we were doing it. The administration tried questioning a bunch of people at the school to find out who pulled it, but because no one else knew and we acted clueless, we got away. How long did it take you to realize that the way you were brought up was in no way normal? When I was 16, I started dating my first real boyfriend, whom I ended up marrying, then divorcing because that's what sometimes happens when you marry your first ever boyfriend. The first time at their home, we pulled up to their old, shabby home in dire need of paint and repairs. He opens the door and his mom greets us, hugs him, hugs me. I felt so awkward. I couldn't recall ever getting a hug before. We watched a movie together. Afterwards we decided to run down to the store a mile away to get some snacks and his mom said, "Be safe. I love you." I was awestruck. They say I love you every time they leave the house? I couldn't recall ever being told I love you. I was 16 years old and never had anyone to ever say the words I love you. They didn't have much. The house was shabby. They lived paycheck to paycheck. Old clothes. But they were happy. Loving. A family. They talked about their feelings. They talked about their emotions. They talked through fights, even if they were yelling. When we married, his parents welcomed me with open arms even though we were young. I was 17 and pregnant. His mom took me in as I was kicked out. Bought my maternity clothes, took me to doctor appointments, and even through my awkwardness, my crying fits because of hormones and family issues, and the only way I knew how to handle that, was anger. They loved me. They hugged me, they told me they loved me, no matter how awkward I was, no matter how much anger I showed because I didn't know how to show pain, no matter how hard it was for them, they loved me. They taught me how to be a good mom, how to be a good person. Even now, being divorced for 15 years, I still keep in contact with them. I still send Christmas cards and text them. My ex-mother-in-law still calls me her daughter. It enabled me to tell my children that I love them on a daily basis, to tell them how wonderful they are, how they can do anything, to give them hugs nightly, to talk to them, show emotion and teach them to show their emotions. I'll forever be grateful. She helped me break the family cycle.